are in listen-only mode.
I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, April 28th, 21. May we please have roll call?
Chair Clark.
Here.
Vice Chair McGill.
Here.
Commissioner Baker. Commissioner Feck.
Here.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
You.
Commissioner Longstreet.
Here.
Commissioner Perry.
Here.
Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we do not. I would like you to know that Commissioner Corey Baker is about to log in, so he should be joining you shortly.
Great, thank you. Do we have any written communications?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the written communications you've received relate to items on your agenda.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to public comment. I believe there's a slide that's going to come up that'll explain our public comment process. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. The total amount of time for public comments will be 15 minutes.
For those who wish to speak during public comment, please use the raise your hand functionality in the GoToWebinar control panel. We are currently displaying a graphic showing where that is located. When I call on you, please unmute yourself and then speak for a maximum of 2 minutes. For those who wish to speak on an agenda item later in the meeting, please raise your hand when the item is under discussion.
Ms. Navarez, do we have anybody waving their hands, their go-to hand?
Chair Clark, yes, we have one raised hand, Anna Marie Gott.
Welcome, Ms. Gott.
And she's not showing as, you need to enter your PIN. So I just resent it to you, Ms. Gott. There we go.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Anna God, and I'm making these public comments after having heard about all of the, I guess you could say, problems with the Ortega Park Master Plan. I don't know if you are aware of it, but I have actually been able to take a look at the actual grant that was submitted by the City of Santa Barbara for the $8.5 million to go ahead and basically rehabilitate the park. The reason that the city is actually able to apply for this grant is in part because of the socioeconomic disadvantaged population that we have on the east side. And what I find really troubling after having, looked at some of the communications between the city and other groups, as well as just hearing about what happened last weekend, is that the city seems to be more than willing to actually use the population on the east side as a way to get the grant, but is actually not willing to listen to the people who live on the east side, especially those who may not have been able to participate because they were not notified. As you may be aware, most people heard about all of the workshops through word of mouth. They were not directly contacted, and I think it's a huge problem that we have at the city, that most of the ways in which we contact individuals, especially through public noticing, is through English only. So mailers to people's homes in many cases were not in a language in which many on the east side could have even understood. So I just wanted to make that public comment and urge you to really, think about communicating to the city council that we need to revise the master plan and we need to do this well in advance of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. That brings us to our youth council report. Do we
Chair
have-
Clark, we have another public speaker.
Oh, wonderful.
It's Victoria Valente. Ms. Valente, I'm unmuting yourself. I'm unmuting you. You may unmute yourself. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
Hello, Parks and Rec,
Yes.
Commissioners. I'm speaking in protest over the manner in which the Parks and Recreation Department has handled the Ortega Park renewal project. The master plan needs to be discarded and redesigned. From what I've observed and from information I've gathered in my public records requests, it is clear that from the very beginning, the city had no intention of including the input of the community. In 2017, Jill Zachary inquired about and searched for a feasibility study to justify an additional skate park. In 2008, public outreach began using methods that wouldn't actually reach the community. They advertised on the radio, in a lesser known newspaper. They sent out mailers to property owners of rentals within a short distance of the park, most of whom live out of town. And they posted on their Parks and Rec website, never actually reaching the community. Workshop attendees found out through word of mouth. And then when they attended these workshops, brainstorm boards were pre-printed with what the city had wanted. For example, a non-competition pool. Surveys were pre-printed with the answers, such as shallow pool, splash pad, gathering areas. On the other hand, the city went directly to members of the skateboard industry to plan 2 specialized workshops to design the skate park. Skaters were summoned directly from Skaters Point to attend next door for their convenience. Community input has been contrived, just like the master plan. Obstruction of community participation also occurred in the latest community workshops related to the murals. First, by the designers' rate the murals approach. Was this done deliberately to offend the community? And then with Saturday's meeting, that was carefully planned by Mark Alvarado. This was hijacked by an organization calling themselves the Save Ortega Park Committee to confuse the public, thinking they were the Ortega Park Mural Rescue Committee, even with the same logo, tricking them to sign their petition that will likely be misconstrued as supporters to destroy the murals. They locked arms to appear unified. Their apparent mouthpiece from the city screamed, "Si se puede." "Si se puede, destroy the murals" was their actual message. The city's offer to work with mural advocates to reach the East Side community was insincere. They used the community's low-income designation to apply for the grant, and then in the design process, they ignored what would actually benefit the
And your
community
2
as
minutes.
stipulated in the grant. The
Get your
city
voice.
start
Sorry.
over and redesign the Ortega Park project.
I'm sorry, Ms. Valente, your 2 minutes were up, so I muted you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input, Ms. Valente. Do we have other members of the public that wish to speak at this time?
Chair Clark, no, there are no more raised hands.
Okay, thank you. With that, that'll bring us to our youth council report.
Chair Clark, there is no youth council report.
Okay, thanks. So that'll bring us to Commissioner Committee assignment reports. I'll start with Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
Thank you. I attended the youth council meeting with student with our holding pattern waiting for in-person events to begin safety, but they did talk about recruitment for next year's youth council.
Thank you, Commissioner Lester Buxton. Commissioner Longstreet.
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting this month. The community meeting for the for Plaza Veracruz and the trapeze, so we could view the installation. And that is on our agenda later. And also I attended a neighborhood cleanup on April 17th down out of Pershing Park and in that beachfront area.
Thank you. Commissioner Perry.
Good afternoon, all. I did attend the arts and crafts meeting last night. And after 3.5 hours of discussion, they are moving forward. They are looking for common ground and they're looking for ways to improve their show. And I hope they find them. They are on the right track.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. That's great. Commissioner Feck?
The Creeks Committee did meet on April 21st, but I was unable to make that time.
Thank you. Vice Chair McGill?
Yes, I attended the Integrated Pest Management special meeting this month where 2 exceptions were discussed and approved, one for the golf course and one for the Louise Davis Center. We had a Park Foundation meeting where we talked about a method of bequeathing of scholarships for summer fun, and also the band shell renovation park sponsorship for that, for fundraising for that. And I also attended the Ortega Park mural workshop this past weekend, which was interesting. And there was a variety of feedback, quite a bit of which actually was quite forward thinking and really kind of future oriented. I don't think the media has necessarily gotten the full balanced view of the feedback that was received, but it was an interesting meeting. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you. I also attended the Integrated Pest Management meeting, the Park Foundation meeting, as Vice Chair McGill has described, and the Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting, which we will come to next on our agenda. We'll discuss all the items that happened during that meeting. And
Chair,
now,
Chair, one more thing I forgot is I just wanted to announce that on May 7th, at 1 in the afternoon, 1 to 4:30, I believe it is, there's going to be a joint meeting of the De La Guerra Plaza Visioning Committee and the Historic Landmarks Committee to work on issues to move that project forward.
thank you. And something I think, I don't, if we heard mentioned, a lot of us also attended a budget workshop this month regarding our proposed budget. Thank you. That brings us to employee recognition. Can you guys hear, and I'm hearing a noise outside. Can you hear it? Do I need to put on earbuds?
I don't hear anything.
I don't hear anything.
Okay, great.
Chair, Clerk, and Commissioners, I am very happy to report on service awards for 4 Parks and Recreation Department employees. First of all, Andrew Brumond, who's actually a recent addition to our department, but he spent most of his career so far in airport, and that totals 15 years of service to the city of Santa Barbara. With just over 6 months in Parks and Recreation, we hope to have him for a long time. George Gonzalez, who's a senior grounds maintenance worker, also was recognized for 15 years of service in the Parks and Recreation Department. He works in the Parks Division. Cindy Acosta, who's in the Recreation Division and an administrative specialist, was recognized for 25 years of service to the city, and she's been integral to our recreation operations for 25 years and doing a fantastic job too. And then lastly, Ken Brown, who is our park superintendent, was recognized for 30 years of service to the city of Santa Barbara. So Ken also is one of our long-term employees with lots of history about the evolution of parks and where we are. He is our playground specialist. As you've heard from him on occasion over the years regarding the different playgrounds that we've constructed throughout the city, and also oversees a lot of the sort of construction repair projects that we have to do, as well as the Park Ranger program. So those are the 4 employees that were recognized by the City Administrator Paul Casey this month.
Thank you. Altogether, that's 85 years of service. That's pretty impressive. I mean, a thank you to those 4 employees and the invaluable contribution that continuity makes in tenure. I think the department's lucky to have all 4 of them. Thank you. And I think we have some other people to recognize too. Honda Valley Park Youth Trail Volunteers.
Yes, and we have Steve Biddle, who's a park supervisor, as well as Keon, going to do this presentation. So I'll turn it over to them.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair Clark and commissioners. And if we could bring up our PowerPoint, I'm going to go through part of it and then turn it over to my esteemed partner from the Honda Valley Trail Volunteers.
I'm sorry, we're having some technical difficulties. My fault. You'll give me a minute here.
Okay.
While we're waiting, Mr. Biddle, I believe you just organized some volunteer trail work on April 17th. I didn't
Thank
see
you
that.
very much for recognizing that. That was State Trails Day, which is the first of our 3 front country trail events. And after coming out of a year of being shut down by COVID, it was pretty amazing. I capped it at 30 volunteers to try and keep it safe and work under existing COVID guidelines, which we were able to do. We broke it down into 6 work groups and we're able to maintain and do tread and brush work on the entire length of the ridge trail that comes off the same trailhead as Cold Spring Trail. Got a lot done. It was a beautiful day.
Oh, thank you so much. I can't wait to go. I know I was supposed to be there. I ended up vaccinating people instead. So I can't wait to go see the work. Excited.
We missed you, but coming up in June, we have National Trail Day. So I'll remind you that one.
Great. What, do you know exactly what day that'll be yet?
I don't yet. It's either going to be the first Saturday or second Saturday, and we're just seeing which one works best. I think it may be, yeah, we're just coordinating schedules right now.
Great, thank you. And it looks like we have the PowerPoint now, I think.
Very good. So welcome, Chair Clark and commissioners. Again, my name is Steve Biddle, and I am a supervisor with the City of Santa Barbara Parks Division. So I'm here today to share some information about volunteering in parks, but more specifically with a youth group that I'm currently working with in Honda Valley. Next slide, please. But first, a couple forms of volunteering that we do in our parks. Some of these are horticulture projects, such as what goes on in Mission Rose Garden or Alice Keck Park. We have seasonal events in many of our parks, such as beach cleanups or Earth Day. We have neighborhood enhancements, such as Helping Hands, Looking Good Santa Barbara, and other neighborhood cleanups. We have park enhancements where groups may do things such as paint benches, tables, mulch around trees or shrubs. Public service projects such as Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, school service hours, or nonprofit organization service hours. Next slide, please. So an area that I oversee and have a lot of fun experience with is trail volunteer work within the city of Santa Barbara. And some of the areas that involves are front country trail events, which I just mentioned, State Trails Day. We also do National Trails Day, National Public Lands Day. And front country trails is the three agencies, which are City of Santa Barbara, County of Santa Barbara, and the U.S. Forest Service, working in conjunction with our nonprofit volunteers. Some of them are Montecito Trails Foundation, Los Padres Forest Association, Santa Barbara Trails Council, Multi-Use Trails Coalition, REI Co-op, and formerly Santa Barbara Mountain Bike Volunteers, which is Sage Trail. So that's kind of our cooperation with agencies and nonprofits on 3 big events. But we also do smaller events within our open space parks, such as Parma, Rattlesnake Canyon, Stevens Park, Douglas Family Preserve, Hale Park, and Honda Valley. Next slide, please. So the park we're looking at today is Honda Valley Park, and within this 30 acre park are a couple types of trails. So we have 2 formal entrance and access trails, one off of Carrillo Street and one off of Miramonte Drive. There's also existing access roads that are used as walking trails and paths as well, that come down off Highland Drive and near Cannon Lane. And there's user-created trails that we currently do not maintain. So at this point, I'm going to turn over the presentation to my extremely talented and enthusiastic and energetic partner, Kian Stren.
Okay, next slide. Thank you, Park Supervisor Steve Biddle, and hello, Chairperson Clark and Commissioners. My name is Kian Stren. I am so honored to get the opportunity to speak to you, this board today, about the work that the new youth trail maintenance team on Alta Mesa has been doing and how we all got started. Next slide. Our story started with a group of friends, and we all shared the same passion of the outdoors, and we've like hiked together all around various trails in town. Our team includes myself and my friends Himit Singh, Miles Moore, Malcolm Harris, and Scott Kipp, and I think they're viewing the webinar right now, so they're here. Next slide. Oh yeah, so this is just like a little visual of us, view of us hiking. Next slide. Yeah, so one of our favorite places to hike is the beautiful open space in our neighborhood called Honda Valley. Honda Valley truly is like a hidden gem in our city to me, and it features oak groves, creek, tons of like little vistas, and even like a little canyon, which is really cool. And it's really made us feel really lucky to live on the mesa. Next slide. But every year around this time, the trails get very like overgrown with brush, as you can see in this picture of the maintenance road, and all of the winter storms that come through cause erosion and cause big ruts to form in the trails. And we saw how the trails were out of shape, so we decided to contact the city to see if we could help maintain them. I reached out to the former Parks and Rec Administrative Assistant, Miss Terry Yamada, to propose the youth trail group for Honda Valley. And I was so surprised to see how open she and Mr. Biddle were to the idea. And just like that, we set up a meeting and to start our work. And we started off at the Carrillo entrance. Next slide. So our group has been working every Wednesday for the past few months for around 2 hours a day, under the mentorship of Mr. Biddle and the executive director of Sage Trails Foundation, Mr. Dylan Oslegger. And we plan to continue every other week. And Mr. Biddle and Mr. Oslegger have been very, very passionate teachers to us. They've taught us the proper techniques for widening tread on trails and what tools to use for different work, like when to use the McLeods and stuff like that, and any other tips that are necessary for trail maintenance and creation. We all work together as a team, and we really feel proud whenever we look back and we see people walking on the sections that we just fixed up. Next slide. So in this map, I just wanted to give you a sense of where we've been working. The white lines are the single track trails, and the purple ones represent the maintenance roads. We started off our work on the entrance trail on the bottom left, right over there, coming out of Carrillo Street, and we're just working our way down the trail. We're almost to the end of that one, mainly just doing leveling and widening. Next slide. Oh, future projects. So our plans as a trail team are to continue work on Honda Valley for years to come, and also expand our team, hopefully. We want to restore all of the existing trails in need and oversee the trails and perform regular maintenance trips. And hopefully by then, Honda Valley will become a very popular open space. And then we can start to propose creation of new trails to match the growing demand. And we want to turn this neighborhood gem into the envy of the city. Next slide. And I will turn it back to Mr. Biddle.
Thank you, Kian. As we've found out, as I've worked along with Kian and the trail team, they far surpassed some of my possible initial expectations. They're an energetic and really bright group of young men, and I'm looking forward to some possible collaboration with them on days perhaps when we're not able to do trail work or tread work due to soil conditions or weather. There's a longtime park volunteer, Mr. Gary Janka, who has worked in Honda Valley for about 25 years planting trees. He has at times looked for people to assist with things like mulching, planting, and watering of those young trees. And some of those young trees are now about 25 feet tall down in the valley. So that would be a great thing to continue with this next generation of youth. And perhaps down the road with some of the revegetation projects that our Creeks Division's been involved in, we might lend a hand to removal of non-native species or some weeding around new plantings and things like that. Next slide, please. So I think Kian's mentioned that youth are the future. And with Kian's group, I see a better future within our parks, especially Honda Valley Park, and great potential. There's an untapped resource that perhaps we could move into other areas of collaboration and cooperation. We certainly need assistance in many of our parks, and I think there's a great benefit to getting our populations involved. So in conclusion, a couple of the things that we've been able to do with Kian and will continue to do is trail maintenance with he and his team. They've been great. I love this opportunity for youth involvement within our trails, and that's allowed us to complete more work that our park staff may not have time or resources to get to. It also allows the Honda Valley Trail team to service the public and improve the trails themselves. This also allows us to increase positive youth opportunities and public involvement. So as we've seen this past year, getting kids outside and anybody outside is a benefit. Getting physical exercise and the opportunity for neighborhood people and youth to interact with nature is a huge benefit. And I think it's going to increase this team neighborhood access and education, just getting them out there and talking to other people about this. So one of the things I've already seen is an increase in accessibility and enhancement, whether we're talking about Front Country Trails or Honda Valley or Hale Park. Well-maintained trails into a park improve visibility and accessibility. It also improved park access allows a wider scope of park users and visitors to get into the park and enjoy whatever the facilities are. If we can make the trails safer and bring the standards up, it's going to allow more people to get in there of a diverse age group. And lastly, but not least importantly at all, are some of the environmental benefits we can see from having a group like Kian's involved with this, and a properly dispersed trail drainage during a rainfall event, going to control runoff, get the water into the ground where it's going to benefit our parks and plants. They can also be involved in some trash cleanup, which will keep that from going downstream into further sources. So I'd just like to say, lastly, that thank you to Kian, Emmett, Miles, Malcolm, and Scott, as well as their parents who've allowed them to participate with us, and Dylan O'Slager from Sage Trail, who jumped right in without even a hesitation and has joined me in making sure that we're training this group to safe and modern standards, and gets out there and just really digs right in with them. And then also the support of my manager and the Parks Administration for supporting this effort. We're all stretched for time, and I appreciate the support and the willingness to allow us to go out and reach out to Kian and get them involved. So that concludes our PowerPoint. I think Kian had one more slide that I didn't see in there. And Kian, I'll let you just verbally say your request for name ideas if you want to.
Yes, I believe that the slide must have gotten deleted, but no worries. So I just wanted to say that the whole experience has proven to us kids that we could really make an impact on the community, and it gives us a sense of pride. And we hope that some more kids start to put themselves out there and do stuff like us, because the future of this community and country is in their hands. And though we've accomplished a lot, there is still one tiny thing that's missing: a team name. So please, if you have any ideas, you can tell us them or put them in the chat or wherever you want to do. And thank you again, Chairperson Clark and Commissioners, for the opportunity to speak to you. And I wish everyone a great afternoon.
Wow, thank you. Kudos to you and your friends for seeing that something needed to be done and asking how you could help. You're right, this community needs more people like you and more stewards. And I know how hard that work is. I've done hundreds of hours of trail volunteer work myself because I'm a trail runner and sometime mountain biker. So what you guys did wasn't easy. So congratulations, and please reach out to your friends and inspire them. And thank you to Mr. Biddle and the entire department for supporting these kids and helping them learn to become stewards, for taking them under your wing and mentoring them instead of turning them away. It was extra work for you, and it took some more time, but you're going to reap benefits for years to come. I'm sure other people want to congratulate you. Ms. Zachary, did you want to?
Chair Clark, I can wait if the other commissioners have comments.
Commissioner Longstreet.
I would just say thank you. I'm very impressed and just appreciate all you've done. And I think the Youth Trail volunteers deserve many kudos for all that hard work. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Vice Chair McGill.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously echo the kudos. So one thing, I spend a lot of time in the open areas, and these neighborhood parks are real gathering places I've observed for the kids in the respective neighborhoods. And kids get opportunities in these parks that are really special. People who live near them are very, very lucky. And so to the degree that this program can take seed and go into the other neighborhood open spaces, I think would be a real benefit for the community and for the kids in all those neighborhoods. Thank you.
Was that a hand, Commissioner?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I just echo that too. Just extremely impressed by your presentation, Kian, and had an opportunity to read the letter they sent to us as well, and just really great presentation skills and writing skills, and just excellent work that you and your friends are doing. And thank you so much for volunteering and taking time to do that. So.
Thank you.
If I may echo the same, thank you and keep it up. Bring in more friends. There's lots of trails and it's wonderful to see your involvement at such a young age. Much appreciated.
And just in closing, you know, Steve Biddle made those remarks about, you know, the challenges that we have with maintaining trails just from a limited resource base. And the wonderful gems Keon mentioned in terms of Hidden Valley Park, Honda Valley Park and other parks. And so we absolutely love and embrace volunteerism and leadership that community members, that young people in our community provide, because not only do they help the parks and the community, they also teach us stuff too. And it's always wonderful to learn from others. So thank you, Keon, and thank you to your friends. And I look forward to seeing you in the park sometime.
And maybe we could all try to think of a name and send it on to Mr. Biddle for him. If I racked my brain last night and I haven't come up with anything yet, but.
The only one I came up with, I don't think they would like. So maybe I'll just put it in an email.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. See you out on the trails. And with that,
Thank
the summary of council actions, everyone have a chance to read it. And if you did and you have questions, please ask them now. No? Okay. That brings us to the minutes. I'll make a motion that we waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of March 24th, 2021.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? So moved. And with that, we come to our Street Tree Advisory Committee items.
Good afternoon, Chair Clark and Commissioners. We could go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. The first Street Tree Advisory recommendation for review is the request to remove 2 Mexican fan palms located within the public right-of-way at 205 Toyon Drive. These trees are technically located on the side of the property along Los Pinos. On the application, the applicant was requesting removal of the Mexican fan palms primarily due to concerns with a water service that's in close proximity to one of the fan palms. In addition to that, there was debris related / maintenance concerns with the accumulation of fronds on the Mexican fan palms themselves. The committee reviewed the 2 trees, had general discussion about the health, noting that they were in generally good health, noting that they'd not been pruned maybe ever, which led to the significant accumulation of the fronds. There was discussion specifically around the water service. The palm in the photograph which would be to the right, I believe, in everyone's view, is in very close proximity to the water service, and there was general agreement amongst the committee members that over time this could lead to problems with the water service. The other palm, the palm to the left or further to the west, was discussed as well in relation to its proximity to the water service, and there was general agreement that this palm posed little, if any, threat to the water service. After review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal of the palm closest to the water service or furthest to the east of the property, and deny the palm to the west.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Mr. Slack?
I've got just a quick question. Given it's a street tree, who would be responsible for skirting the palms?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, this is a really kind of unique situation in that the trees are within the right-of-way, but they would technically be adjacent property owner responsibility based on the municipal code. given the distance away from the road. So in areas such as San Roque and areas within the Riviera, the street tree municipal code has a section, I forget the actual section, but that says if a tree is more than 6 feet from the built roadway, it is not considered a street tree. So along Los Pinos, if you drove the length of Los Pinos, there's several Canary Island pines that are really close to the curb. And those would be street trees, and these were just outside of that. So they're trees within the right of way, and they fall under the street tree ordinance and the same process and procedures in place in terms of obtaining a permit for removal. So these trees technically are the adjacent property owner's responsibility to maintain.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are there more questions? Okay. Do we have anybody from the public wishing to speak on this agenda item?
Chair Clark, I do not see any raised hands.
Thank you. I can make a motion to agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendations to approve the removal of the palm to the east and deny the request of the palm to the west.
I can second that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I did have one question. Was there a recommendation for pruning of the tree to the western side?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Perry, there was no real specific comment. The committee doesn't really, within their purview, have a formal way of recommending pruning. I think there was general agreement that it would be a benefit. We'll certainly follow up with the applicant and let them know if they're satisfied with the decision of the commission that pruning would make a lot of sense given that condition of the palms.
Thank you.
I believe we all voted, but Commissioner Perry.
And I'm in agreement.
Thank you. Did you get that, Ms. Navarez?
Yes, Chair Clark, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next item for review is the request to remove a California sycamore located immediately within the front setback of the property at 600 West Islay Street. The applicant was requesting the removal of this California sycamore due to its location shoehorned directly between the sidewalk and the property wall, noting that the tree in a fairly young state is already causing minor damage to the sidewalk and impacting the private residence's small wall directly behind the tree. Noting that given time and additional years to grow, the problems are only going to get worse. The sidewalk damage is only going to increase, and the damage to the wall is only going to increase as the California sycamore has tremendous long-term potential to get to a really large tree. The committee reviewed the request, noted that the tree was in excellent health, and there was lots of comments wishing that maybe it was in the front yard or somewhere where it wasn't in such a poor spot and would lead to such significant damage as the tree grew. Likely it germinated as a seedling in this location. It would be it's almost next to impossible to imagine a tree being planted in this specific location. The applicant did express an interest in planting a street tree in lieu of the California sycamore. The committee was in general agreement that this really just wasn't a practical long-term place for this tree, especially given the species and its long-term potential. After review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removal of the California sycamore with the condition that the applicant work with city staff and plant a designated street tree on West Islay Street. In addition, the committee made the determination that the commission could make the finding that the principles of good forest management supported the removal.
Thank you. Questions? I had a question. If the sycamore was replaced with a street tree, would it be the city's responsibility to maintain that street tree?
Chair Clark.
I'm sorry, I guess more specifically in the beginning when it's young and needs a lot of water.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we always try to have a conversation with the property owner when we plant a street tree to see if they have the capacity to assist with watering. So it's our hope that we can, you know, part of the program's success in general, whether it's a conditioned street tree or it's something that, we're planting just as part of the general program, that we can get good buy-in and support from the homeowners. So it's a conversation that we have with the homeowner. It's difficult to condition the maintenance of it. It's something that we've explored. So we'll have a talk with the applicant, hope that they can assist us with watering. If in the event that there's some kind of hardship where they can't do that, staff can fill that void.
Do you ever give out those Gator bags, or do applicants who are planting street trees, do they generally, I see those Gator bags around all the new trees in town. Are those placed by the city or by the property owner who's replacing a tree?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, we have a pretty good inventory of them from use over the years. So we always have some lying around and we replenish them from time to time. So a lot of times when we do that, we'll just provide that as part of the, it's a really nice tool because it kind of takes the guesswork out of watering. You know, if you fill it up, you've kind of delivered the perfect amount of water for a week. So we would just provide that since we have so many of them.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Would anyone like to, oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone from the public to speak on this item?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
So I'll make a motion then. If so I will move that we agree with the Street Tree Committee's recommendation to approve the removal of the California Sycamore on Isley Street on the condition that it is replaced by a new designated street tree.
I will second that.
Great. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And so moved. Thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, real quick, just if we could make reference to the finding. The committee did recommend A, which is just principles of good forest management.
So let me amend the motion to say that this is that it is the findings and on the principles of good forest management would be best served by the proposed removal.
I concur with the change.
Do we need to vote again? Okay, we'll vote again just for the record. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee item for review is a request to remove a Mexican fan palm located within the front setback of the property at 2054 Chino Street. The applicant is requesting the removal of this palm primarily due to debris concerns. There was reference that the applicant planted the tree years ago and it has been allowed to grow, accumulate these dead fronds, and now there's fear of debris concerns as well as a general concern with the proximity of the tree to the home. The applicant also listed on the application that they're planning on doing some re-landscaping of the property and that they had intentions of planting new trees. It was very vague and we were unable to get any additional information prior to review of the application. The committee reviewed the tree, noted that it was in generally good health, obviously had never been pruned, which led to the accumulation of the dead fronds. There were comments made that the palm, if pruned, probably would look pretty good. Again, noting that it was in good health and it just simply had not been pruned. There was discussion that it was difficult to make any kind of recommendation to support the removal, even if there were plans to re-landscape the property, not knowing what the long-term plans were, especially if there were proposals to plant new trees on the property to offset the existing Mexican fan palm. After review, the committee made a recommendation to deny the removal without prejudice, to give the applicant the opportunity to return with additional information if they really do in fact are going to pursue landscape improvements and propose the possibility of planting trees that would lead to offsetting the existing Mexican fan palm.
Thank you. Do we have questions?
If I may offer a comment,
Please, Commissioner
I
Perry.
think what Mr. Slack just said is very valuable. It'd be very interesting to see what the proposed plans are, because frankly, pruned or not, the tree doesn't fit the neighborhood. It's going to be a solo standing palm tree without a lot of supporting flora around it. I would vote for removal.
I did have one question, Mr. Slack. Would you consider a palm tree drought tolerant?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I think it's dependent upon the specific species. Mexican fan palm is, to put quite simply, essentially bulletproof. So, this specific palm, you could easily say is drought tolerant. It germinates readily all throughout the community, with no supplemental watering, and requires, very little effort to grow and do really well in this area.
Thanks. Thank you. If there are no more questions, I'll ask Ms. Navarez, are there any members from the public wishing to speak on this agenda item?
Chair Clark, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Thank you.
I would have a comment. I agree that it's a large tree in the front yard, but really without a replacement in that area, just taking it out just isn't acceptable at this point. And that if we're going to convey to the homeowner, I would like to see a canopy tree, just something that is, gives a little more green and life to that area, because that corner is fairly unvegetated at this point. So, and with that, I would make a motion to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee's recommendation to deny the removal without prejudice under the principles of good forest management.
I'll second. Is there any discussion? And my only discussion will be that I agree with Commissioner Longstreet and that there would be a hole in the landscape there without that tree. Right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
I'll oppose.
Thank you. So moved.
Chair, Clark, and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is located at 225 Mohawk Road. The applicant is requesting the removal of a red flowering gum from the front setback of the property. There were multiple reasons listed on the application for removal, including debris concerns with just falling fruits, leading to issues just with property maintenance. There is also visible damage to the driveway that's adjacent to the tree, as well as impact to the fence. The applicant did provide some additional information that they're doing some improvements on the property, which involves some plans to re-landscape, and they just simply felt that, or noted that the tree did not really fit into the long-term vision for the property. The committee reviewed the tree, noted that it was in excellent health from the committee's perspective, and just a really fine specimen of the red flowering gum. They did address each of the concerns, ultimately noting that the tree had considerable value and that the issues brought forth by the applicant could all be managed without the need to remove the red flowering gum. There was reference to the street tree that's not visible in this photograph. It's just to the I think the west of the property. And the applicant was hopeful that that tree, given time, would take the place of the existing red flowering gum that was within the setback. The committee felt that, or noted that the two trees could work quite well together. And again, referenced that this is a really good specimen, and after review, made a recommendation to deny the request for the removal of the red flowering gum at 225 Mohawk Road.
Are there any questions for Mr. Slack? Okay, Ms. Navarez, is there anyone from the public here to speak on this particular item?
Chair Clark, no raised hands.
Okay.
So I'm prepared to make a motion. And this struck me as quite a significant tree and quite impactful to the neighborhood. So I will make a motion that we agree with the Street View Committee's recommendation to deny the removal of the red flowering gum on 225 Mohawk Road.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I will oppose again.
So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee item for review is the request to remove a king palm located within the front setback at 229 San Clemente Street. On the application, the applicant provided information that the property is going through pretty significant improvements, which will necessitate the removal of the king palm as the property starts to encroach towards the tree. There's plans to redevelop the entire front yard, and that redevelopment will require the removal of the tree from the applicant's perspective. On the application, they did note that they would be planting a olive tree in place of the king palm, sort of in the same general area, but closer to the street, since I think the building footprint sort of moves towards the king palm. The committee reviewed the application, looked at the plans provided by the applicant showing the proposed remodel and the building footprint sort of encroaching towards the existing king palm. In addition to that, the arborists on the committee noted that the palm has a sort of a unique condition known as leaning crown syndrome. So the drooping nature of this palm is believed to be a nutritional deficiency and essentially is uncorrectable, and over time continually gets more pronounced. It's not really too much of a safety concern. It's more of a sort of a funky curiosity, but there's really no known effective treatment to essentially restore upright vertical growth to the palm once this condition is developed. The committee made comments, and there was general agreement that there was more benefit to be gained by the planting of the large canopy tree of the proposed olive, and ultimately made a recommendation to approve the removal of the tree with the condition the applicant replace a tree within the setback that can achieve a minimum height of 20 feet. In addition, they made the determination that the commission can make the findings that the principles of good forest management would be best served by the proposed removal, and that a reasonable and practical development of the property on which the tree is located requires its removal. So they recommended both findings A and B for this request.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Do we have questions? Ms. Navarre, is there anybody from the public to speak on this funky curiosity? I love that terminology.
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Okay. I will make a motion that we agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee to approve the removal of the king palm at 229 San Clemente Street and replace with trees that can reach a minimum height of 20 feet based on the findings that the principles of good forest management would be fostered by the proposed removal and that a reasonable and practical development of the property on which the tree is located requires removal.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next request or the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation is the request to remove 2 queen palms located within the front setback of 223 Equestrian Avenue. The applicant listed a couple reasons why they were seeking removal of the queen palms. They indicated that back in essentially last year, they had the property tented and they feel that the fumigation of the property has adversely affected the palms, and they've noticed a pretty significant decline in vigor and then an acceleration of the fronds growing and dying. In addition to that, the property's utilities run through this very narrow strip between the adjacent property and their driveway where the queen palms are, and they were concerned about potential damage to water and gas service in that general area. The committee reviewed the application. The committee noted that the trees were in fair health. There probably is some legitimate concerns regarding the tenting. The committee did note that tenting, fumigation can have pretty adverse impacts on the plants. And there was general agreement that the palms were just simply in a poor location. After review, the committee made a recommendation to approve the removals, not placing any conditions. The applicant did propose use of things like large planters and other alternatives to plantings, shade tree or palm trees in this very small location. And there was general agreement from the committee that this made generally good practical sense as well. So the committee did recommend approval of the removals and determined that the commission could make the findings that the principles of good forest management necessitate the removal of the 2 queen palms at 223 Equestrian Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Slack. Do we have questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick one. The issue of potentially impacting the utility lines, the water and the gas. Did the committee discuss that and concur? I'm just thinking of it relative to the tree we just looked at.
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, I think there was general agreement that there was a possibility of that. The palms have, in this case, are much older than the Mexican fan palms that we just looked at the Toyon property. So it's possible that there's a lower probability of impact, but there was general agreement from the committee, at least the approving members, that felt that the trees were just simply in the wrong location.
Just I just had a quick curiosity question. Were the trees under the tent, did you say? Were they tented in with the building?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, I had the opportunity to speak with the applicants a few days ago when we were out posting the trees in advance of the commission meeting, and they went into a little detail. The trees were essentially outside of the actual tenting, but the tent was tucked in really close proximity, right directly behind the palms. So it's not unreasonable to imagine some level of exposure to the fumigation within the root system there.
Mm-hmm. Like methyl bromide, probably what they're using, maybe. Right. Commissioner Longstreet, I believe I interrupted you.
I was just gonna make a motion to concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for removal of the 2 palms. And it was for good forest management. Was that correct? The findings?
I'll second.
Just make sure there's no public speakers.
Yep. Ms. Navarez?
Chair Clark, there are no raised hands.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Chair Clark and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a Brazilian pepper tree located within the front setback at essentially the side setback, but we'll note it as the front setback at 1460 Crestline Drive. The tree is located on the side of the property, but it sits at a corner property. So there's actually 2 front setbacks for this property, and this Brazilian pepper tree is within that setback. The applicant's requesting the removal of the Brazilian pepper due to general decline in vigor, as well as the hope to move away from this particular species. There was an interest expressed on the application to plant an avocado tree in place of the existing pepper tree, and there were just general maintenance concerns. Brazilian pepper tree is a tree noted to produce lots of, you could call them sprouts or root suckers that start popping up from the root system kind of all around the tree, and that was noted as an additional reason for removal on the application. The committee discussed the application. The tree was noted to be in fair to poor health. There was general agreement from the arborists on the committee that there was something unknown, nothing that really stuck out, but there was something that was causing a pretty significant decline throughout the canopy of the tree. And the committee members felt that the tree did not have lots of useful service life left. After review, they made a recommendation to approve the removal of the Brazilian pepper tree with the condition that a new tree be planted within the front setback that can achieve a minimum height of 20 feet at maturity. And in addition to this, they made the determination the commission could make the finding that principles of good forest management would be best served by the proposed removal.
Thank you. No questions.
The boundary go back. The girl upstairs, just down the letter. The
From the
girl that
Yes. Rose?
I'm sorry, Chair Clark, I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I will make the motion that we concur with the recommendation of the Street Tree Advisory Committee at 1460 Crestline Drive for the removal of the Brazilian pepper and the replacement with a tree that can achieve a minimum height of 20 feet, and that this is based on the principles of good forest management.
And I will second that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Oh, sorry, there's lag time. Opposed? So moved.
believe that concludes the Street Tree Advisory Committee items.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Slack. And that brings us to our director's report.
There I am. Chair Clark and Commissioners, just wanted to highlight a project we recently started. Started working on it, or at least evaluating the need in the height of the pandemic, as a result of community members reaching out and asking the status of the Plaza Del Mar bandshell and thinking ahead to post-pandemic, or at least slightly different conditions where once again we'll be able to enjoy music, and people probably will feel more comfortable doing that outside. And not just music, I should add, but dance, presentations, community events, so on and so forth. And so we spent some time evaluating the condition of the building, determined that actually it is in pretty serious decline. It needs structural repairs, needs to be waterproofed, needs some facade improvements in order to be used again. So as a result of that, we spent some time scoping out a project. We had an engineer do an evaluation, reviewed sort of the wonderful history of the bandshell. It was constructed in 1912. So it was a popular destination for many in the community, and that was far in advance of Shoreline Drive continuing and any further development west of Castillo. And unfortunately, over time, it fell into a little bit less use. We've had certainly our share of variety of misuse issues at Plaza Del Mar, and hadn't really been paid attention to for some time. So we spent some time, as I mentioned, looking at the condition, put together a scope of work, scrounged around for enough funds in this year's budget to initiate design work, engineering work, so that we could take the project to the Historic Landmarks Commission to get approval. It is a designated city landmark. It was landmarked in 1990, and be able to once again refurbish the bandshell and make it available to the public. As part of that, as the commission has experienced in many of our other projects, as soon as one touches a building or a location, it triggers all sorts of code requirements, accessibility needs, all of which we support and are interested and willing to do. And then also highlight some of the sort of more modern amenities that bandshell users really want and need, and have told us they really want and need, including electricity, not just electricity to be able to see if it's in the evening or dusk, but actually to be able to amplify sound. So all of those aspects of the project are currently being evaluated by an architecture engineering group. And we hope to have some conceptual plans to take forward to the Historic Landmarks Commission, I believe, if I have my dates correct, by early July. One of the neat things about this project is there's a growing community interest in seeing the bandshell renovated. The Park Foundation just a few weeks ago embraced it as a project that they would serve as the fiscal agent for grants and donations from organizations and individuals. And we have, as you will see in the upcoming budget presentation, requested and recommended some funding, some seed funding for construction that hopefully will help us secure other funds to move the renovation forward. And then lastly, I would add that if all the stars aligned, and often we're ambitious with our timelines, we could actually be under construction perhaps this time next year. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have a question, but I'm really very supportive of this project. I recall one year we did 4th of July down there, and that park was just alive, and it was wonderful. And I'd love to see it reactivated. This is exciting.
I agree. I feel like a lot of us are going to have a hard time transitioning back into an indoor life, even after we've all been vaccinated. And I embrace the opportunity to dance and listen to music outside. I think it's a really good choice of focusing project money and time on right now.
and a perfect location to be revitalizing.
And again, it's, it's going to make the community safer by putting activities that we want in that park and having it feel like a safe place to go. So another good reason to look at putting our community back into that park and using it in the way that it was meant to be used. Really important. Is there any other questions or discussion?
I'm just going to add, just a few short years ago, I did put on a production at the bandstand, and it was incredibly well received by the community as well as the hotel that's immediately adjacent. We had people sitting in their balconies watching the performances. So sound was not an issue, parking was not an issue, homelessness was not an issue. It's a gorgeous facility. We need to take care of it. So I'm glad that we were finally doing something.
And Chair Clark and Commissioners, if you have a moment to walk through the park, it really is a gem. And I would also add that the band shell right now is fenced because it is not safe. So if you see a fence, don't be surprised. It's only because we really don't need people to be accessing it. We also removed the roof so that the structural engineer could get a good look at the existing condition. But I would also add that forestry staff went through and did a prune job on many of the trees, and then we also had a contractor come in and take care of the palm trees. So we're trying to focus a little more tidy up and presentation of the park while this project's underway as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. And welcome, Mr. Hanna. You're here to talk about the Santa Barbara Trapeze Company at Plaza Veracruz.
I am, Chair Clark and Commissioners. I think I'll wait a minute for the PowerPoint to load up.
Ouch.
Right. There we go. Good evening, Chair Clark and Commissioners. I'm here tonight to present an exciting new recreational class and camp opportunity for the community. The department has actually been working with the Santa Barbara Trapeze Company since 2018. At that time, they initially approached the department about a new way to bring exciting programming to the city and the residents here. We did not have the staff resources, and we couldn't really identify a great location to place this apparatus to actually start conducting the classes. I would also add that I have Randy Cohn. He's one of the 3 owner-operators for the Santa Barbara Trapeze Company. He's here tonight to answer any questions that you may have that are certainly things he's more qualified to answer. So anything that's really trapeze related, he's probably the person that will answer those things for you. But I will take you through the presentation, and he can come on towards the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So just as a quick reminder, the commission will receive a summer camp and marketing presentation at your next month's regular meeting. We wanted to bring this forward today, basically because it's a timing thing. We've been working closely with Santa Barbara Trapeze Company to get close to an operating agreement. We're looking forward to inking that agreement and then moving forward on combined marketing initiatives, both between their outreach in the community that they've already established and our typical marketing initiatives that we do as we head closer to summer. This is just a presentation tonight. It's not an action item. But we also thought it was part of our public outreach to have this presentation to you here at the commission tonight. As you're aware, summer camps are a key contributor to the department's success. I think one of the things staff do very well is look for unique opportunities for the community, things that other agencies are not doing. And at times, some of those things may seem right on the cutting edge or things that the community's not used to seeing. I remember many years ago when kiteboarding was a booming sport, we added kiteboarding, we've ended up stand-up paddling. We recently ended traveling surf camps. So the addition of Santa Barbara Trapeze, their classes, their camps, their activities isn't something that we haven't done in the past, but this is certainly going to be unique to Santa Barbara as a Parks and Recreation camp offering. And so we're looking forward to advancing this process forward. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background on Santa Barbara Trapeze Company. They were founded in 2019. They specialize in trapeze and aerial arts programming for all ages. And if you look at their testimonials on their website, I've seen youth as young as, I believe, 6 years of age, and active adults as old as in their 80s participating in their fitness and trapeze programming. Even though they're new to Santa Barbara, they have years of international experience providing trapeze activities, both internationally and in other parts of the United States. They specialize in trapeze programming, corporate development, and leadership training. And if you haven't seen their operation or you were unable to participate in the community workshop, they're currently located at the Earl Warren Showground. So as you're trying to enter the freeway there, as you cross Las Positas or you're driving north on the 101, you'll often see them. I would encourage you, if you can't get a sense of size and scale today or what they're offering, I would encourage you to drive by and just take a look. They have a really great program there. They make it welcoming for people, whether you're a spectator or a participant. It's really well done. And in seeing that, it makes me think back to 2018 when Mr. Cohn was trying to explain how great this would be, and it's going to be great for Santa Barbara. And you know, I wish we could have jumped on it then and there, but we just couldn't make it happen at that time. So it's really exciting. Next slide, please. I think it's also just to provide a little bit of background on Plaza Veracruz, with the location that we're proposing that Santa Barbara Trapeze Company operates. It is a neighborhood park destination or designation. I'm sure the commission is aware, but there's a significant history, long history of misuse behavior and illegal behavior that's occurred at this park. Recently, the department has really focused on some maintenance improvements, including we removed the playground that was in the park. We've expanded and renovated the turf area. We've done tree and landscape maintenance within the park. And if you've been by any time in the last 6 months, you'll notice that we've erected temporary fencing in the park, which has really allowed us to do the maintenance work that was required, but also you know, make the park safe as we were conducting these improvements. Next slide, please. Just close this slow network connection screen I have in front of me here. All right. So the exciting part of this is understanding the background of Plaza Veracruz, knowing a little bit more about Santa Barbara Trapeze Company. This is an opportunity for us to explore a new partnership at this point for calendar year 2021. What we're looking to do in this partnership with Santa Barbara Trapeze Company is bring in recreation trapeze classes for all ages, which is something they already are well established doing in the community. We want to build on their experience in other areas and other parts of the country to develop half-day summer camp programmings for youth. And so we're looking at a camp that would operate 9 to 1 for 1 week periods, up to 8 or 9 camps for the total duration of the summer, something similar to what we do with our other half-day camps. We're also, as we go into a partnership, we've been working with Santa Barbara Trapeze Company to make sure that the rates that they charge are affordable and accessible. They're providing scholarships in the same manner in which we do with all of our service providers to the Campership Alliance, which are then allocated out to youth that are the most neediest for those types of activities in the summertime. And in addition to that, Mr. Cohn and the rest of his team have committed to looking at other philanthropic opportunities to engage the community to make the classes and the camps of trapeze more accessible. And he already works with nonprofits and school districts and other agencies in town for his current setup there at Earl Warren Showgrounds. Next slide, please. So in identifying Plaza Veracruz as a location for Santa Barbara Trapeze Company, we worked with the city attorney, and then we received approval from the community development director under Municipal Code 30.40.030, which ultimately determined that the proposed temporary land use for this type of activity was acceptable at a neighborhood park. And so we kind of checked that box. It fits the municipal code definition for operating this in a neighborhood park. The temporary use that we're currently looking to enter into an agreement with Santa Barbara Trapeze Company would be starting them here probably in the next couple of weeks of May and running them through the end of December. During that time, we'll evaluate and consider a longer partnership. That could be both at Plaza Veracruz or other city parks. Currently, they have 4 trapeze apparatus, so they have the ability to be in multiple places at different times. So we'll be evaluating this as a longer term partnership, both for Plaza Veracruz and other city parks. We're looking at promoting positive recreational programming in the park, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in our community outreach that we did. And in doing positive recreational programming, it allows us to deter misuse behaviors. And that's by providing active recreation in our parks, active management of the site, on-site staffing by Santa Barbara Trapeze Company to make sure that they manage access to the park. And we're proposing to keep the temporary fence at Plaza Veracruz up at this point to make sure that we can have active management of the park and continue to deter some of the misuse behavior that people associate with Plaza Veracruz. Next slide, please. So as part of exploring Plaza Veracruz and this partnership, the department hosted a community meeting on April 14th. We typically, as we do, notice business and residences with bilingual material within 300 feet of the park. We're only really obligated for something like this to do 100 feet, but we usually go over and above that. The department also promoted the community meeting on our regular social media platforms. To provide a little context for the community meeting, the department authorized Santa Barbara Trapeze Company to set up a trapeze apparatus to help participants in the meeting visualize the size and scale of the equipment. To be honest, I think the second time I drove by Plaza Veracruz on Haley Street, I didn't even notice it in the park. It really blends in, it's open, it's airy, it does not have a lot of solid surfaces. So it certainly wasn't something that me, myself, as I drive through our areas and I look at our parks and our recreation facilities, stood out to me as not fitting in this location. And I think we got a lot of feedback from community members that participated along those same lines. Next slide, please. So in the pictures here, you can see the trapeze apparatus set up on the picture to the above right, and then the participants below. We had a total of 28 participants attend the meeting. There was overwhelming support for the department's vision to put in active, positive recreational activities and continue to deter misuse at this location. There was overall support for the size, the scale, the operating hours. We have talked with Mr. Cohn and his team about only operating within regular park posted hours. So the start time, I believe that we're approving is 8 a.m. in the morning to 1/2 hour after sunset. They believe they can do all of their programming within that window, so we'll have no additional impact to the neighbors with lights and those things. We received a lot of feedback from the local business owners and the residents that live on Santa Barbara Street immediately adjacent to the park, that they were really happy with managed park access. They really felt a significant change from the improvements that the Parks Division undertook to improve the park, the recent fencing, and a feeling of some of those issues that have long been entrenched at this location have not returned. And so this gives them an opportunity to look forward to having a compatible activity in a park immediately adjacent to them that they were very supportive of. One of the things that came up during the meeting, and it's something that the department will continue to explore and evaluate, is, you know, are there opportunities for other compatible or complementary uses in the park? Santa Barbara Trapeze Company is essentially using the southern portion of the park. If you were to divide the park in half, more towards the Haley Street side, towards the middle of the park, which leaves a good, decent sized grass expansion of park area on the northern end, closer to Coda Street, as you would be closer to the Head Start school facility or farmers market. And so, you know, this is a community park, it's a neighborhood park. We want to make sure we can provide additional access, but we want to make sure we do that in a way that doesn't put the burden on Santa Barbara Trapeze Company to manage all access into the park, doesn't take them away from their jobs or their responsibilities for providing safety protocols for their camps and classes. But it's definitely something, as we continue to look at Plaza Veracruz, how we can continue to positively, actively program that site. Next slide, please. So the next steps, we would go forward after tonight's commission meeting. We'll complete a personal services agreement. This is something we do with all of our third-party providers. So, you know, camps that we do not offer or recreation programs, we typically use these types of agreements. We would outline the terms and conditions, both for their hours of operation. We would define their camp fees, their scheduling, their classes. Santa Barbara Trapeze Company will be responsible for renting and maintaining an on-site portable restroom so that there's no additional impact to the neighbors or the immediate resident or business owners that are adjacent to the park. We would then go ahead and initiate summer camp marketing campaigns. We've passed the deadline for the independent summer camp deadline, but the department has already queued up additional marketing initiatives as we go closer to summer. We would provide park access as early as May 17th. So once we get some documents from Santa Barbara Trapeze Company that would allow us to close the agreement, provide that access. And essentially they could start providing classes immediately, and then camps would start in early June. Just as a reminder to the commission, when we do personal service agreements for camps, we usually do that in a revenue sharing type agreement. And so we'll be working with Mr. Cohen on the percentage that the city maintains for marketing and supporting registration, and then the percentage that him and his team would receive for essentially owning the equipment, operating the equipment, and providing this new and exciting adventure. And then we'll monitor and evaluate it and make sure that it remains compatible with the neighbors. We'll continue to be open-eared about things that arise. I know Randy and his team at Santa Barbara Trapeze Company have gone out, went door to door, met a lot of the residents that were on Santa Barbara Street, that met the business owners. You know, they really want to be a good neighbor in this park. And so we'll continue to monitor and evaluate that. And that goes back to us looking towards more of a long-term partnership as we kind of move through this initial step. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know Mr. Cohen's on the line over here. So if it's trapeze and all the types of great things they do, he's your guy. Otherwise, I could probably answer anything related to the park or our programming in general. Thank you.
I have one quick question, I guess. Just in regards to the fencing, is that just for safety, is it gonna be locked after the last class, or is there like security, just because obviously people are in the air and you just don't want anything being tampered with late at night or things of that nature?
Sure. Chair Clark and Commissioner Fleck. So the fencing that's currently there is temporary and it is currently secured and locked. I would defer to Mr. Cohen in terms of how much activity he wants coming through that fence when he has classes. I do know they're on scheduled times. So whether or not he wants to have other activity going on in the park with the fence being open or not, we would defer that to him based on his safety protocols. At the end of the night, the park would be secured. And what was unique to me or interesting to me is when they close their facility or they close their apparatus every night, all their ladders go up, and anything that you think you could jump on to get onto the apparatus and play beyond park hours if somebody was to jump the fence is extremely difficult. And I would also say that the fencing that we have around Plaza Veracruz is higher than the current fencing they have at Earl Warren. And then Santa Barbara Trapeze Company has other ideas in terms of security for the site beyond park operating hours.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, you may have said this and I missed it, but would this be in lieu of the facility at Earl Warren or in addition to the facility at Earl Warren? And I'm really thinking of it as how much demand is there in the city for this? And how much can it be supported?
Chair Clark and Vice Chair McGill, I can start, and then if Mr. Cohen would like to add on to this. So they have a desire to be in a much more highly trafficked area, somewhere where they can actually be part of the community. I don't know their full arrangement with Earl Warren, but it's my understanding that they are looking at this as being as a primary site. But they do have visions for using other parts of Santa Barbara, whether it's another city park. I know that they've been in conversations with Elings Park over the years about having a trapeze location there. So I don't know, Randy, if there's anything you want to add as it relates to the Earl Warren transition to Plaza Veracruz.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for the great question. Obviously, all the great kind words, Rich. The plan would be to move to Plaza Veracruz full time. We agree that the city of Santa Barbara, for right now, would be best supported by having one trapeze location. And as Rich said, being in a more metropolitan part of the city where we can engage with the community members is the way we'd like to be spending the majority of our time.
Thank you.
I had a quick question, Mr. Cohn. Anticipating summer camps in Plaza Veracruz through your trapeze company, what kind of precautions will you be taking for COVID?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we'll definitely be following the local guidelines, that's for sure. At the moment, our team is still taking temperatures, asking students the standard questionnaire questions about whether they've been sick or in contact with someone who's been sick, and maintaining masks throughout the class, and wiping down the equipment as best we can. Very similar standards to sort of any outdoor fitness facility.
Thank you. That's reassuring. Thank you.
I have a question. We're entering into this sort of on a temporary basis. I see that. But the fencing, the aesthetics of the fencing we currently have, is there any better temporary fencing out there in the world, or are we looking at activities in Plaza Veracruz that in the future will require fencing, where we are going to put something just a little more aesthetically pleasing in?
Sure, Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet. I can start, and then maybe Ms. Zachary would like to add to this. If it hasn't already happened, we've already gone in this week. If it's not this week, it's scheduled for Tuesday next week to replace the temporary panels that have the large footprint with the sandbags on them, to improve the overall aesthetics of the fencing that you saw when you participated in the community meeting. So it was a goal that we had. We still are considering it temporary at this point, but we are putting in fencing that will look more taut, more stretched, more professional, and provide a better aesthetics to the park, but also be more functional for whether it's park maintenance vehicles that have to get in there, or how Santa Barbara Trapeze Company operates the site. So I'd be happy to send a follow-up email to the commission. If it was installed, I'll drive by there on my way after this commission meeting. Otherwise, I'll find out the exact schedule and I can let you know. As it relates to more permanent fencing, I would probably defer that to Ms. Zachary.
Well, and I understand that requires quite a few steps to make a change like that. But, just as it would be nice, it's nice to hear that you're cleaning that up.
Chair Clark, Commissioner Longstreet, yes, we actually have improved temporary fencing going in today. If it's not complete today, it will be soon afterward, so that the site has a better presentation to the community and also is safer to access around and through. And then in subsequent years, not this coming fiscal year, but hopefully in fiscal year 23, we will be able to begin some planning initiatives for longer term vision for Plaza Veracruz and the extent to which how we will need or should manage access in and out of the park. There's a couple of other construction projects that are looming for the community in the vicinity of Plaza Veracruz. One is the Santa Barbara Housing Authority is building some new transitional housing for homeless folks on the lot at Coda Street that's adjacent to the park roadway. And then also the Coda parking lot is the preferred location for the future Santa Barbara Police Station. And as both of those initiatives move forward, there'll be more construction. And there'll also be the opportunity to sort of look at that park in the context of the changing, how downtown is changing, and find ways to revision how it can better serve the community.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Comments? No?
Chair Clark,
I-
you have a raised hand, so.
Oh, okay.
Are you ready to take public
If
comment?
there are no more questions?
We have 2 raised hands, so once you are
Okay.
ready, we'll start.
Looks like we're ready. Let's move to public comment.
Okay, the first person is Anna Marie Gott. Go ahead.
Good afternoon or evening, commissioners. Looking at the site map and then hearing the discussion regarding having the park fenced off, I just have to really, state that a May through December temporary use is not temporary. This is kind of ridiculous if we are going to be excluding the public from a park owned by the people and not, a private entity. I really question why, we are having the trapezes put at the entrance off of, I guess it's East Haley versus toward Coda Street, so that you could actually allow people in the park during the day. The other thing I really just have to ask is, are we going to ensure that anyone that's enrolling in a camp over the summer or at any other time is, are we going to give residents priority so that these camps are not going to be taken up by tourists who need to have entertainment for their children while they want to go wine tasting in the Funk Zone or spend a week here in Santa Barbara? I really question, who exactly this entire facility is going to be used by. Is it going to be used by children, or is it going to be used by adults, or is it going to be used by tourist children versus our own children here in the community? It looks like a really great program, but I just don't think that it fits with Santa Barbara in this location, especially when we are prohibiting people from using a public park. It needs to be on private land, and they need to go pay rent to another property owner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott.
Okay, Paul Bowen, go ahead and then you can speak.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, great. I'm a student of the Santa Barbara Trapeze Company since 2019. I have no financial involvement with them whatsoever. I'm a local adult. From what I've seen, they operate a very good facility. They're awesome at really engaging and teaching youth. I think that the scholarships that will be created for this will be great for disadvantaged youth in Santa Barbara. I think this is a great deal for Santa Barbara personally. Their COVID prevention has been real good. We're always getting our temperatures taken and asked all the usual questions, and masks are worn. Regarding access, my experience at their current location is that they're very welcoming for people who want to come and watch trapeze, even if they're never going to be a customer. I mean, I've even seen a retirement community bus pull in there. So the public, I think, I can't say what they'll do at the new facility at this park, but I suspect that the public will be very welcomed in, and hopefully they'll come in and watch trapeze. They do have to control the visitors for safety's sake, but I can't imagine it's going to be, lock everybody out and don't come in. I think they're going to be welcoming in and saying, come watch trapeze, have some fun here in your park. So in regard to the previous comments, I think it'll keep the park fairly open to the public. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Chair Clark, we have another raised hand. Victoria Valente, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, commissioners. I wanted to say that I agree with the comments made by Anna Gott. I would be concerned about our public park being used by private business. That part concerned me, but the reason I came over to speak was that I had a conversation with my fellow East Side residents this morning. We discussed Plaza Veracruz, and concerns were expressed that this park isn't going to be accessible to low-income residents, particularly people of color, that this was indicative of white privilege. I don't know if he's coming to speak today, apparently not, but I thought I would speak on his behalf and express the same concern. I'm wondering, is this for public benefit, the actual residents of the East Side, or is this is the target user tourists from out of town? Because I think our public parks should benefit those in the neighborhood and those in the community. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers? Ms. Zachary, did you
Sure.
want to say something before we start discussion?
Sorry, Chair Clark, there are no more speakers.
Okay.
No, Chair Clark, if we can address any comments or questions that the commission
Yeah,
has, add anything afterward.
I have a couple things to say. First of all, with regards to what Mrs. Anna Marie Gott said in the beginning about being concerned about excluding people from public land, when I first learned of this proposal, I had the same reaction. And I drove by the park a couple times and I thought about its history, and it's the community is already excluded from this park because of the misuse. This is not excluding people. It's gonna actually be inclusive of our community by making the park. Right now, it's not really a safe place for people or families to hang out, and there's not a whole lot of active recreation happening there, and that's what our parks are for. So my first reaction to the project was like, oh no, wait, this is not, something for a private business. This is for our public. This is for our families, but they're not using it as is. So a little bit of research, a little bit of investigating, and I've in full support of this project now. I believe that repurposing this park is a great way to give it back to the East Side residents, give it back to people. I did hear both Ms. Gott and Ms. Valentia talk about being worried about tourists signing up for the camp and excluding residents. And I was wondering if Mr. Hanna could tell us if there's any kind of history of people from out of town relying on the Parks Department for its summer camps, because I hadn't really heard of that being a problem in the past.
Chair Clark and commissioners, I would say that out of the, last year we served over 2,800 kids in camps. Sometimes we're up in the 4,000 numbers. Those are all local kids. Those are families that live immediately in Santa Barbara. We do have non-resident rates for families that live in Goleta and areas that do not immediately belong in the city itself. But we provide programming at all different levels in our parks to ages and incomes and people of all abilities. And we use school sites and parks and beaches and all of our public spaces to accommodate these types of programs and deliver them. I think I said it pretty clearly earlier in the presentation where, this is a Parks and Recreation partnership with a service provider to expand this type of programming to the community. They're committed to philanthropic work. They're committed to providing scholarships for people that may not normally have access to something like this. And they've demonstrated that with their track record already up at Earl Warren. Whether or not tourists will go there and participate, I don't see that being a bad thing. I could see parents that want to go over and, use the farmer's market and they sign their kid up for a 45-minute class across the street at the Santa Barbara Trapeze apparatus and do that while they're there. So it doesn't preclude tourists from participating in this, but I think the primary focus is to serve our residents here in Santa Barbara, and it does not exclude East Side or West Side or any part of Santa Barbara in terms of how we offer our programs and services.
Okay. And this is not a new concept. We have plenty of independent contractors that already run camps. So it's the exact same model that you've partnered with many successful community serving camps before. I think that's important for all of us to remember. Commissioner Longstreet?
Well, I attended the community meeting, and first of all, I was impressed with the way the equipment fit into the park. I didn't quite know what to expect, and there's some options there, and that was really good to see, because that park has got a pretty good canopy of trees in it. So that was very positive. I spoke with one neighbor who was a woman of color who welcomes this project specifically because of the activities that are going right outside her back fence. So she was highly supportive of it and is an immediate neighbor. I was on the commission when we put in the non-resident fees. I mean, that was a big thing I was interested in, to make sure that our families got served first. And I do believe that's the most important thing. We're doing that today. I don't see this as any different than the beach volleyball camp or some of our other camps that operate, the surf camps that use our public spaces to provide services for our families and residents. But the other side of that is we're a public agency, and we cannot discriminate or exclude people from activities in our community. That's just not right. So I'm really supportive and excited to see something positive happening in that space. I really like this idea of it being, of us getting this going now, so we have a good summer trial. I spoke with both the owners, and I was impressed by their commitment to the community. I've known people that have taken their classes and speak highly of them. So we have to try new things. You know, that's the nature of recreation. You know, not everybody's going to play basketball forever, or, you know, we've watched roller hockey come through, and all different sports that move through our parks and through the community. And I'm glad to see us trying something new. I think it will be interesting to have this experience under our belt as we look at planning in the future for this park. What works, what doesn't. And so I'm very excited to see it happen. I'm very glad I attended the meeting and got to speak with the business owner that owns the building across the alley, and, you know, spoke of all the problems he's had. And he, you know, the contact he's had with staff, and the support staff has shown them, but an inability to change the use, just, it has been years in the making. So now we have a chance to change things, and it's great. I'm fully supportive.
Agreed. Positive recreational programming. Vice Chairman Gill.
I just want to weigh in just because of the comments that I'm really excited by this. I think when we've got an area that clearly has issues, to send such a positive message as bringing in a private business is great. I'm glad that we're trying to do something different and creative, and that might generate a buzz that might not, it might be hard to generate a buzz with something else. So, you know, this is something that really has the potential to take off. So I'm fully supportive of it. And I just, you mentioned it, Chair Clark, but the private public partnerships is very much a way of doing business in recreation. So that is nothing new. And so that strikes me as a red herring, to be quite honest. So that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a comment?
One comment.
Commissioner.
I want to get up on the trapeze. I think it's the coolest thing that's come to town. Thank you.
Likewise.
And I'll just say I'm fully support this as well. I think that's so cool. I've never in my life ever had the opportunity to get on a trapeze, and to know that that's an option to try something new, I think is fantastic. So great.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cohn, for coming to us. And thank you, Ms. Zachary and Mr. Hanna, for being proactive and forward thinking and adding a wonderful new opportunity for our community. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And that brings us to old business. Does anyone have anything to discuss from? Nope. Okay, we'll move to new business. The Parks and Recreation recommended fiscal years 2022 and 2023. That sounds so far away. Budget.
One moment.
Could we take about a 2-minute break?
Let's, do you want, let's take a 5-minute break. So we'll re-adjourn at 6 o'clock.
Thank you.
And I think we have reached our budget discussion.
Good evening, early evening, commissioners. With today's presentation, you will receive some of the same information you received last week as part of your special meeting, but we'll also be presenting the proposed fiscal year 22 and 23 budget for the Creeks Fund and the Golf Fund. Last week, it was more focused on the general fund. Next slide, please. So very briefly, our mission of the Parks and Recreation Department is to provide clean and safe parks, beaches, and recreation facilities to enhance Santa Barbara's beauty, promote stewardship of resources, and to provide quality recreation and cultural experiences to improve the quality of life for Santa Barbara residents. Next slide, please. And this slide actually should also include both the general fund, the Creeks Fund, and the Golf Fund, as well as a discussion about the miscellaneous fund, COVID-19 impacts, and capital projects. Next slide, please. As far as personnel for the department, the format for the department in terms of management includes myself, assistant director, and we have 5 management positions, of which 2 are currently vacant. We have 19 programs, so our budget's spread across 19 programs, 4 funds, and just over 91 permanent full-time equivalent staff. We have about 73,000 hourly staff hours, and those are staff that are hired on a temporary basis to provide support for park maintenance, but largely to support recreation programs and services. Next slide, please. When we look at our budget for 22 expenditures by fund, this gives the commission a sense of how it breaks down. We have an overall budget of just over 25 million going into fiscal year 22. Of that amount, just over 7 million is for the Creeks Fund and the Golf Fund. The balance of the department expenditures are in parks, recreation, and administration. Next slide, please. When we look at our revenues by fund, so again, just over 25.5 million expenditures, just over 13 million in revenues. So both the Creeks Fund and the Golf Fund are considered enterprise funds. So all revenues that are generated for those funds stay within those funds. So when we talk about parks and recreation and administration and revenue there, those revenues are specific to parks, recreation, and administration, operations, and services. Next slide, please. So for the general fund, next slide, please. You know, really what we always like to remind ourselves is parks are community assets, and they provide open space, neighborhood play spaces, they host community gatherings and cultural celebrations, they protect natural resources and wildlife habitat. We promote youth physical and social development. We support family, adult, senior wellness and fitness, and we enhance the community's livability and vitality. And the last year plus has really demonstrated the tremendous value that parks are as community assets, providing the most safe locations for people to recreate during an unprecedented pandemic. Next slide, please. And then when we look at those actual assets, what we have, and this is a real focus on our general fund. So if you think back to the budget and the expenditures that we have, we're about just over $17 million. And our responsibilities cross over 1,800 acres of parkland, 61 parks and sports facilities, 16 community buildings. We have over 6 miles of public beach, swimming pools, a wading pool, playgrounds, tennis courts, pickleball courts, volleyball, sports fields, and then also street, park, and open space trees. Next slide, please. When we look at our recreation programs and services, we had some discussion about that as it relates to trapeze, and the commission will receive an update on where we are next month in terms of offerings for this summer. From summer camps to youth sports and after school programs, recreation opportunities for adults and seniors. Many of us have noticed or perhaps participated in the many fitness programs that move in from indoors to outdoors during the pandemic. We also provide affordable places for families to have gatherings, to have celebratory events. So they're affordable park and facility rental Venues, again, is an area where we haven't been able to do anything since the pandemic, and we'll have more to share with you on that. We also provide venues for many, many community special events. It might not be until later this calendar year and perhaps the new fiscal year where we see a return to the special events that we once had. We also provide social services to low-income families at our community centers on the west side, on the east side, and in the downtown. We wouldn't be able to do much of what we do without partnerships with many community groups, whether it's just an agreement where they come in and use our facility to provide a service, particularly at our community centers, or they're actually providing a recreation or program service, and we partner with them to do that either in our centers or on their own, in their own areas. Next slide, please. When we look at our recommended budget just for the general fund, I mentioned it's 17 million. It's just under 18 million going into fiscal year 22. 5.7 million of that budget is from revenue. So in order for us to retain the staff, provide the programs and services, we have to generate revenue in order to be successful. Next slide. And when we look at the people that help make that happen, this slide provides a view of the last 3 years and going into the next year. What you will see in this slide is that the personnel by division is not proposed to change from last year, nor is it proposed to change in subsequent years. But what is changing as a result of the pandemic is we're leaving a number of positions vacant in order to meet the expenditure savings that we need to meet in order to support the shortfall in revenues on a citywide basis, but also the shortfall in revenues on a departmental basis. Next slide, please. We do have a couple of personnel changes. We report that to the commission and it's approved by council as part of the budget. We have 2 staff serving in positions that will be reorganized into new positions, a sports recreation specialist to a recreation coordinator, and an office specialist to administrative specialist. This is no addition of positions. This just merely reclassifying those positions to better reflect the new duties and responsibilities that these staff members will be taking on. Next slide, please. When we look at our expenses by category, the general fund expense budget again is just under 18 million. And what I would like to point out to the commission with this slide is the change in this expense budget over time. And it really gives a picture of what's happened as a result of the pandemic. So in fiscal year 20, which is, we had 3 months of pandemic or a little over, almost 4 months of pandemic, our expenses by category were just under 16 million. Our projections going into the end of this year, again, are just under 16 million. Had we had a normal year in 20 and 21, we would have been looking at an expense budget closer to 19 million. So reductions have been made over the last 2 years as a result of reduced revenues, but also holding positions vacant and cutting down on our hourly staff. When we look at going into fiscal year 22, the commission can see the proposed expense budget is higher than what we projected this year and what was actually in fiscal year 20, because we are planning and hopeful for a gradual return to normal operations for the department. And then similarly, going into fiscal year 23, another jump up with the anticipation that we will be back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of programs, services, and the ability for people to use our facilities. Clearly, this is a moving target. We monitor our budgets on a quarterly basis and at times on a monthly basis. We generate a significant amount of our recreation revenue in the summer months, and that really sets the trend for subsequent months during the year. Next slide, please. When we look at our division and the expenses by our division, this also helps tell the story of the changes that we're making as a result of the pandemic. The recreation division, generally speaking, has a budget of around 8 million. In the last 2 years, it's been 6.7, and our projected actual expenses for recreation this year is 6.4. Again, directly a result of the pandemic. Had we had a normal year, we would have been looking closer to 8.5. However, we are proposing an expense budget for the recreation division at 7.8 million, with the return to something that seems more normal in 23 again, with hopefully return to normal operations. In administration, similarly, where we're seeing the changes, had we had a normal year going into fiscal year 20, it would have been 1.8 million. We're proposing a budget of 1.6 million for the administration division. Similarly, although the status quo for 23 is 1.9, we're not proposing to retain that level of funding for administration, with the idea that any future reductions or need to reduce expenditures would continue in fiscal year 23. And then lastly, the Parks Division, we look at our actual expenses from 20 and 21, around 7.8 and 8 million. Something more normal would be 8.6. Our proposed is 8.4. And as we'll present further on in the budget presentation, where we've chosen to limit the reductions is in our Parks Division, just as we did this year. The focus that maintenance of our parks and beaches and areas where public really needed access during the pandemic were a highest priority for the department. Next slide, please. Yes, Commissioner Longstreet.
I did watch a little of the Finance Committee yesterday. So as I look at the budget projections, of course, it doesn't look great 3 years out even for the whole city because of the lack of sales tax revenue. But where Parks and Rec makes it up is that our revenues can come back up. Am I getting that right? Our rentals and classes and everything come back up. Is that a fair assumption?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, certainly that's our hope. However, if sales tax revenues are flat and declining, that will also affect the general fund allocation that we get. And so although the proposed budget for fiscal year 23 assumes normal operations, that could be adjusted. This time next year, we could be sharing a different story with you. And certainly as we go through fiscal year 22, sales tax revenue gets reported 3 months after it's accrued. So there's always a lag time, but there's a constant watch on where revenue is coming in and how it affects expenses, and a citywide approach to reducing expenses when there's an increasing uncertainty.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to also review with the commission, the Parks Division, although it's the Parks Division, is actually a pretty diverse division, and there's quite a few things that Parks Division does that are not parks related. The forestry program maintains city street trees, and a very large portion of the forestry budget is for trees in the street right-of-ways. Similarly, medians and parkways, those are the areas that are in the street right-of-way. The Parks Division is charged with maintaining those that fall under city maintenance practices. So not all medians and parkways are maintained by the city, but there are certain ones that are maintained, and it falls to the Parks Division to do that. And then in park operations, although it's not easy to see this, the expenses in park operation also speak to some of the contract services that we provide to other departments. And the next slide will give a little bit more information, or a subsequent slide, about the revenues associated with the Parks Division. Next slide, please. But first, let's talk about recreation expenses. This gives a view of the different programs within our recreation division and where the expenses fall. As the commission will note, aquatics has the highest expenditure. Maintaining and operating a pool and all of the aquatics programs is quite costly. When we look at our tennis and pickleball program, for example, it's a lot less. Those are fixed assets that we're able to reuse over and over, and they don't require the level of maintenance and the intensity and have that intense use that a pool does and pool maintenance does. And then similarly, as we look at facilities and special events, this really captures all of our indoor facilities, almost all of our indoor facilities, and we have high costs for maintaining those facilities. So a good portion of our budget comes from paying for water, from paying for electricity, from paying for building maintenance. There's a whole variety of expenses that we have that go into this expenditure budget. Next slide, please. When we look at revenue overall, it gives a sense of what the general fund revenue is at 5.7. Recreation presents the most significant amount, 3.6 million in programming and facility rentals. We also receive rent from our nonprofit leases at our facilities. We have some reimbursement funds that come in, and then we have interdepartmental transfers, and that really speaks to the work that the Parks Division does, either to maintain street trees, parkways and medians, and or provide services to waterfront and the Public Works Department. Next slide, please. So specifically, when we look at revenue by source and kind of the change over time, and this speaks to what we're grappling with going into the next fiscal year, our actual revenues in fiscal year 20, we're just under 4.3 million. We're projecting only 3.8, maybe 3.9 million in fiscal year 21. A full year of facility closures, limited ability to provide programs and services and generate revenue. But then when we look at, if we'd had a normal year, it would have been closer to 6 million. So it's easy to see how the pandemic has adversely affected the department's ability to operate. Looking ahead, although not a normal year, we are hoping and planning for, certainly as we go into the first quarter and then into the fall and winter, that our revenues will start to rebound. And again, all of this will really depend on continued improvement to the health situation in the community. And that's what we're hopeful for. And then similarly, as we go into fiscal year 23, that's the picture that we've painted. And when we have approached this from a fairly conservative level, however, also from a hopeful one. This is a revenue budget that to some extent we also manage and monitor and can reduce. You know, if we don't have the revenues come in, we immediately look at our expenditures and find ways to reduce expenditures to offset that loss in revenue. Next slide, please. And then just specifically to the Parks Division and specifically to Commissioner Feck, since this is your first download on the city department budget, which is a lot to take in, and I certainly recognize that. Forestry revenues from the utility users tax for street tree maintenance is just over 900,000. Grounds and facility maintenance, that addresses the services we provide to waterfront for landscape maintenance in the parking lot areas, as well as to the Public Works Department for the Sheffield open space, medians and parkways, as I mentioned earlier, related to streets. And then park ranger services, we have a contract with the school district where we provide services for monitoring school sites and ensuring safety there. Next slide, please. And then by program, again, for recreation, gives the commission a sense of where that revenue comes in and how it relates to the budget. As you may recall, the aquatics expense budget is 1.7, but our revenue is only 900,000. So the city subsidizes the aquatics program by about $800,000 every year. And similarly, when we look at other events, even tennis and pickleball, the revenue does not cover the operations of that program. So throughout our recreation programs and services, there's a significant amount of subsidy. Revenue might represent half of what we expend in the recreation budget at times. Next slide, please. So we also like to present to the commission changes in our fees and charges. Your budget package includes all of that information. It goes to council for approval as well. We have 186 recreation program and facility fee areas. For next year, we have very little that we're proposing to change. We have 10 new fees that address new programs. We're discontinuing 6 because the programs aren't there. And then moderate increases or decreases relative to 23 of those programs. And as in prior years, we consider a variety of factors related to cost recovery, participation, competition, community benefit, and flexibility. And we're also finding that, as was discussed in the last item on your agenda, our contractors have changes in costs. And so those costs increase their fees, and their fees are what they get paid through our system. Next slide, please. So examples of recommended fee changes, a 3% increase in select youth camps related to higher operating costs and excursions. We have a new camp offering for junior lifeguards, which is a 3-week camp. Aquatics fees are going up. Our water costs go up like everybody else's. And we're subject to all the same rate increases, and we're facing 6% next year and 6% in the subsequent 2 years, which is actually higher than what residents are facing in terms of cost increases. And then we also have other fees that are coming from the professionals that teach tennis, and then also pickleball permit fees, which increasing labor and maintenance costs. Pickleball is growing. It's a very popular sport, and so the wear and tear on our pickleball courts is also growing. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we really, areas of our budget that was really important for us to restore, that we had to eliminate last year because of the pandemic. One, we couldn't provide the service, and two, we had no funds to provide the service. So the free programs that we have reestablished for this summer are our free summer fun drop-in program, and that's going to be located on the east side, Santa Barbara. Our recreation swim program at Ortega Park Pool, our food distribution, our youth apprentice, and our Arts Alliance programs. We're also continuing and expanding where feasible our recreation after school programs, our Campership Alliance, youth swim lessons, all scholarship opportunities. And we work closely with the Santa Barbara Police Activities League to identify those most in need, deserving of a scholarship. So in order to do this, we are making other reductions in our budget because there's a high priority for the department, and the city fully subsidizes these initiatives. Next slide, please. And then the miscellaneous grants fund, we mention it very quickly. This is a fund where monies come in from individuals, from grants, from special programs that allow us to expand the services that we provide, whether it's for adaptive services, our summer fun recreation program, Arts Alliance, we have a youth leadership council, the Russ Morrison Junior Golf program, and then also funds that come in to support maintenance of Parma Park, the AC Postal, Rose Garden, and our Fun Country Trails initiatives. Next slide, please. So I'm going to whiz through these because I've spoken to many of them throughout this presentation, but the approach that the department's taking to achieve the budget reductions that we need to do as a result of declining revenues, and also challenges with operating the way we used to, and the associated service level impacts. Next slide, please. So overall, the department is looking at a just over $1.1 million expense reduction to our budget. Of that amount, just over $773,000 was allocated to our department in order to address citywide revenue losses. Earlier in the presentation, I outlined how our proposed expenses and revenues have changed. While the revenues have dropped, so we've had to then also further reduce our expenses in our department in order to meet that revenue, to balance revenue and expense. So we've developed recommendations to reduce our department budget by an additional $351,000. As I also mentioned earlier in the presentation, we don't have reductions proposed for fiscal year 23. Depending on how the year goes, we may be looking at a different scenario next year. Next slide, please. So when we consider those reductions and what we expect or hope for coming ahead, we've budgeted revenue, but we've done it within the context that there'll be strict capacity limits and other health order restrictions. So the use of our indoor and outdoor facilities won't be at pre-pandemic levels. Summer camp, although we had a tremendous summer last summer and we hope to have one in this summer, it does come at a cost, and it does come at the need to determine how to safely have kids and how much camp capacity we can really accommodate to ensure we're in compliance with COVID restrictions. And then we also anticipate special events and larger gatherings will continue to be restricted in the first half of the year, and or perhaps people will be less willing to return to those types of events in the near term. Next slide, please. So when we looked at where we could find ways to reduce our expenditures, we have a number of existing vacancies that can provide short-term savings. Not ideal, but there aren't people in those positions. And so it's easier to count those savings and then figure out how to either not advance an initiative or work effort or reallocate resources accordingly. We've prioritized recruitments for the basic services that the department provides. And we've also come up with a plan where if and when revenue increases, the prioritization for restaffing the department. We've maintained our supplies and services areas largely because it gives us the flexibility to move forward with initiatives as the year progresses. And as I mentioned, we've prioritized free and training programs for youth. Next slide, please. So what that looks like is we have 9 vacant positions in the department. In the general fund, we have 81 general fund positions, so just over 10% of our permanent positions will be held vacant. 6 of them throughout the fiscal year, and 3 would be for half of the year. So we would pursue filling those positions in January 22. We've also reduced our hourly staffing by 45%. Beginning of the presentation, I presented 73,000 hourly hours. We used to be at about 140 hourly hours. So the drop is fairly significant. Some reductions in our supplies and services, but those are really related to if the revenue's not coming in to actually need to purchase that supply or secure that service, then the expense isn't needed as well. Next slide, please. As it relates by division, the recreation division is taking the largest reduction with about 775,000, 10% of its division budget. Administration, 11% of its division budget being reduced, 175,000, and then parks, 2.8% of the division. And in this number, excluded contracts for non-park services. So this truly is a reduction to park operations. There's no reductions to waterfront or Sheffield, so that's not being affected as part of this budget proposal. Next slide, please. So the positions that will remain vacant or proposing include a recreation manager position, recreation coordinator, an administrative specialist, the head pool lifeguard, another recreation specialist in tennis, and then the administrative analyst position in the administration division. That position, the individual moved to another state last fall, and so we've left that position vacant. And then in the parks division, the 3 positions that we're proposing to remain vacant for 6 months include the irrigation, 1 of 2 irrigation technicians, tree trimmer, and a grounds maintenance worker. I would add that Terry Yamada, a longtime employee for the department, administrative assistant, recently retired. However, we are filling that position. So there are positions that are being filled, even though these ones will remain vacant. We're currently recruiting for parks positions, including a parks lead, and that will be filled. And we're recruiting for a new park ranger, and that will be filled. So there are additional vacancies that we've prioritized and requested approval to fill. Next slide, please. Hourly staff reductions are across the department, but really the bulk of it falls in recreation programs, as well as facility monitors, our front desk support staff, and then also overall support for department administration. Next slide, please. So what that means in terms of service level impacts, we initiated facility closures and modified business hours last year as a result of the pandemic and going into this fiscal year. They will be largely maintained. So the Franklin Neighborhood Center has reduced reception hours. There is no hourly staff person there right now. The Westside Community Center open by appointment only. The Davis Center will be open for rentals only until January 2022. We're currently doing some improvements at that site, so the timing is working well for that. We've relocated our senior lunch program and other any senior programs that are able to resume will be at the Westside Center. We'll have reduced operating hours and reception hours for the Carrillo Recreation Center and the Cabrillo Pavilion. And then lastly, this building, 620 Laguna, is open by appointment only now, and we will retain that. So we have not filled the staff positions to serve in a reception area. Some of the advantages of COVID is it's driven people more to online business with the department and the city. And so we're taking advantage of that to the extent possible. There's always somebody available to answer the phone. and to help people through a process. And then again, as we get the green light to reopen our facilities, we will be directing people that want to walk in and get support exactly where to go. So there'll be a lot of outreach to help people figure out, okay, now I can go work out my park rental site and I want to do it in person with someone. I can go to one of these 4 facilities to achieve that. So we will be making sure that the community knows where they can go if they're not able to do it online. Next slide, please. Other reductions, we've had to reduce other programs, mostly really because we don't think they can be held because of COVID, and or it's really uncertain what will happen with schools next year. So we had a free after school sports program that will be will not be implemented next year, but will come back in the following year. Traveling summer camps, and then the ever popular concerts in the park, even though it is out of doors, not enough clarity with the health guidance to really be able to plan something for this summer. Anticipate, though, we will continue to get requests for doing things outside, and we'll do our best to accommodate those as the health order allows. We are restarting our youth apprentice program. We are going to be cost sharing that program with other departments that hire the youth once they've been through their initial training period. Prior to this change, we would actually pay their wages when they worked in other departments. And so we'll be asking departments that take on a youth apprentice that they actually pay their wages. And then we will have a reduced capacity to support our sports leagues, field reservations, and indoor-outdoor facility rentals just by virtue of the reduced staffing. Again, we're balancing what can be done under COVID or coming out of COVID, where are resources most needed in the community and by the community. Next slide, please. So for parks, we're focusing our park staff, making sure general maintenance needs are always top priority, and that when we have landscape needs that are more specialized, we fund that through our special projects, and we bring on support from landscape contractors to get that work done. For administration, without that analyst position, a number of our immediate and long-term park planning, policy, and park administration programs and services will continue to be placed on hold. We won't be advancing new initiatives. Next slide, please. And then, as I mentioned, the programs to be restored. This gives the commission a sense of the cost of our summer fund program. It's $170,000. We're very lucky the Woods Claessens Foundation supports that. And then, as I mentioned, Arts Alliance and Youth Apprentice, Recreation Swim, and outdoor youth and sports programs. Those we will really be focusing on, to the extent possible, full cost recovery for non-subsidized programs. Next slide, please. Lastly, we'd like to present to the Commission a new City Council priority program. This is something that will be discussed by the Council when we have our budget presentation. Next slide, please. And this is a collaborative effort with the school district, local youth and family service providers, and the city, where we would develop a summer nights program starting in summer 2022, which would be aimed at addressing increases in youth violence and creating healthy changes for families. It would potentially be located at La Cumbre Junior High, and it would include a variety of activities, sporting activities, community building, access to health and wellness resources. And it'd be an evening summer program. So it'd be something that families and youth could do from 4 to 8 o'clock, for example. That's currently in the development phase. Next slide, please. And with the idea that we would be funding a portion of it in fiscal year 22, the balance in fiscal year 23, funds in fiscal year 22 are for the startup, and then the initiation, since summer starts before July, and then the actual programming that occurs during the summer. This represents what the city's portion would be. We will be working with our partners to leverage foundation and donor funding and in-kind contributions. And this is not included in our proposed expenditure budget. This would be something that if the City Council chooses to move forward, they would determine the location of the funds for this program. Next slide, please. Very quickly, we have other longer term budget impacts that we'd like to present to the commission that are not being addressed this year. Next slide, please. And will need to be in future years, hopefully as revenues return, it won't be so difficult to figure out how to make it happen. I mentioned water rates are increasing 6% for us every year over the next 3 years. We're still only irrigating at our 2013 levels because we don't have the funds to adequately irrigate our parks. Minimum wage increases will happen in January 22, which is a positive for the community. What it means, however, is it creates compaction among our staff. So we have to look at someone who's been here for 3 years, was at 15. Now we have, incoming staff at 15. How do we accommodate and bump other salaries to reflect their experience and their longevity in the organization? And that has additional financial costs to the city. Next slide, please. I think what I would like to do actually is ask the commission whether they want capital or to jump to the Creeks Fund or ask questions. I would add that Jasmine LeBlanc, Rich Hanna, and Cameron Benson are attending the meeting. Cameron Benson will provide the budget presentation for the Creeks Fund. Jasmine LeBlanc will provide the budget presentation for the Golf Fund.
So you're asking whether we want to ask questions on each section as we go along?
Well, or to jump to capital or dive into the Creeks Fund and then circle back and talk about all of the budgets. And we can certainly, if the commission desires, come back to general fund at the end, because that's where, frankly, the reductions are being taken. Although Creeks is affected, they're figuring it out. And as we've experienced, there's a huge resurgence in golf. And actually the golf budget is probably the most positive budget we've had in a really long time.
I have a question right now on general fund. On page 7 of your memo, at the bottom, when we look at, we're budgeted for full-time at 91.35, right? We're looking at 82. Is the 9 taken off that 82? Are we really going to be dealing with almost 20 or 18 people? Full-time equivalents less?
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, thank you. Sometimes it's a little confusing. The 91 includes staff in the Creeks division.
Okay.
And so there are 9 staff in the Creeks division. So when we're looking at the general fund, it's 82, and it's the general fund that's having the staff reductions. There are no proposed reductions for Creeks.
Okay.
So it's 9 from 82, or just over 10% of our staff.
Which is a huge hit. Good. Thank you for clarifying that. But you can tell I read it.
So I'm happy however you want to do it, but for me, I'd be happy to look at the capital, because then we see the whole, that portion of the budget as a whole, which, it just, for me, it helps me relate the whole thing together. But anyway.
It's only a few slides. So next slide, please. So very quickly, when you look at the department's capital needs across all of our parks and rec facilities, we're looking at a tremendous amount of money. There's over $1 billion. We have wonderful parks and facilities, but many of them are aging and have not had significant reinvestment for decades. And so the cost to build new things in existing parks can be quite high. We have a diversity of facilities. When we look at what we need to do and what we propose to do, we take a number of things into consideration. The use of the site, the benefit to the public, whether there are safety and access considerations, what the community demand is, what the community need is, and the long-term opportunity to benefit the community. So when we do reinvest in a park or a recreation facility, it's with an eye that it will be there for 20 or 30 years. Next slide, please. Just really briefly to provide the commission with a reminder of projects that we've been working on for a number of years that are under construction. Renovation of the Mackenzie Park restroom, that's under the guidance of the Public Works Department, making it fully accessible. Upgrading it will be complete this next month. Bonnet Park, we've been working on that project for many years. It wasn't fully funded as a result of COVID reductions. However, we moved forward working with the Creeks Division to combine park improvements with stormwater improvements. It's under construction. Construction has been unfortunately delayed, but we anticipate it'll be completed in June of this year. As I mentioned, we're underway with exterior improvements to the Davis Center. Again, another project that was underfunded, but we're doing what we can with the funds that we have. We often have to phase our projects, as you know. So second phase for Davis Center will be interior improvements. The exterior improvements will certainly benefit the community in the interim. And then we're about to issue the construction contract for renovating the Eastside Neighborhood Park restroom. That's a project that's funded through a community development block grant. Next slide, please. Projects that are proposed for funding in fiscal year 22 include more funding for Eastside Neighborhood Park, both a community development block grant we were recently awarded, as well as a request for $400,000 from the general fund. So when we couple that with the renovation of the restroom, we should be able to bring some much needed improvements to that park. We're working on Dwight Murphy Field project. That's a project that we're cost sharing with the Gwendolyn Strong Foundation. The proposal is to increase the funding for next year to go into design development and fine tune the designs of that park. And then lastly, mentioned during the director's report, we've initiated some engineering and architecture work for the Plaza Del Mar band shell. We're going to need more than this amount to make the improvements. However, this will hopefully provide the seed funding to encourage investment, outside investment in the project. That's essentially the project's funding that will come to Parks and Recreation in fiscal year 22. And focus on that because capital does vary. Your staff report gives you a little bit more information about fiscal year 23, but it's still, this time next year, it'll be determining whether those funds are really coming forward. Next slide, please. Other projects that are underway that will continue, 1,000 Steps Repair. We hope to be under construction. We're currently in the process of getting our coastal development permit. We will be replacing the playground at the West Side Center with a community development block grant. We're working with Public Works on making some much needed improvements to Creo Gym to deal with drainage, safety, windows that are falling apart. And then depending on what happens with the Ortega Park project, continuing to work on that as well. Next slide, please. And that concludes a very brief capital presentation. Happy to answer questions, or if you'd like Cameron Benson to provide you with the Creeks Fund presentation, we can go straight into that.
It looks like we might be good to go straight into Creeks Fund. Okay. Welcome, Mr. Benson.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Good evening. My name is Cameron Benson, and I will be presenting the Creeks Division proposed budgets for FY22 and FY23 this evening. Next slide, please. To start off, I think most of you know this, but the Creeks Division was founded back in November of 2000 when Measure B was placed on the ballot, and that was placed on the ballot by City Council. It's a 2% hotel bed tax increment. It was passed overwhelmingly by the voters and created a special fund, and it's a restricted fund to be used to improve the quality of stormwater and other surface waters and to carry out creek restoration improvements. Next slide, please. So to get into the budget numbers, I realized as Ms. Zachary was doing her presentation, I should have included a column here for our adopted FY21 budget. With COVID, everything's gone a little haywire with budgeting, but as you can see, when you look at the column for the FY21 projected, we have a transfer in of a significant amount of money, over $1.5 million, and that was a capital project that involved an acquisition, and the acquisition wasn't going to work out, so we canceled the capital project as a way to compensate for reduced TOT revenue coming in during the current fiscal year, and also to be able to cover our capital program for the current fiscal year, which was significantly reduced. So that's why we see that large number in transfer in for the projected FY21, but nothing in FY22 and 23. What we do see in FY2023 is a significant recovery, not back to pre-pandemic levels, but getting closer of the projected TOT levels. If we were looking at the FY21 adopted budget, you would see that the projected Measure B funds for FY21 were 3.7 million. So just so it's not a significant bump up from where we thought we were going to be, but it's a significant bump up in Measure B projection from where we actually are this year. So our total revenue projection in the proposed budget comes from the finance department and is just over $4 million for FY22, and then another increase to about 4.4 million in FY23. Next slide, please. And these are our expenditures by category. Again, with COVID, we've had reductions in what our adopted budget expenditures were. In our adopted budget for FY21, our total proposed expenditures were $2.8 million, or excuse me, $3.8 million, which we're proposing for FY22 to increase to 4.15 million. So the increase from last year's status quo budget is approximately $300,000. Next slide, please. Breaking down our expenses by program area for the Creeks Division, our three major program areas are water quality improvement, creek restoration, and community outreach. Our proposed FY22 budget, operating budget, would be broken down to 50, so that the expenditures are 51% water quality focus, 30% creek restoration focus, and 19% community outreach focus. Next slide, please. The Creeks Division proposed FY22 and FY23 capital budget is shown in this table. The Creeks Division has an extensive capital program that involves water quality improvement projects and creek restoration projects. We have 11 projects that are proposed for funding in this 2-year budget cycle. The projects range from planning to design to permitting to implementation of the projects. Some of the projects have grant funding. All of the projects proposed for FY22 have been part of the Creeks Division capital program and have been funded partially in past budgets. We're looking at increasing our capital spending a little bit this year from the current year. The FY21 capital transfer was $900,000, which was half of what we were planning to spend last year, so before the pandemic. But this year we're moving up just a little bit from 900,000 to 1,025,000, and then another increase in FY23 to $1.475 million. I'll talk more about some of the specific capital projects in another slide. Next slide, please. This slide demonstrates the Creeks Division capital program funding. It shows the Measure B funding and shows how we've been able to leverage that over the years with grant funding. As you can see, these are all competitive grants, so it changes from year to year. Since the Creeks Division was founded almost 20 years ago, we've received almost $19 million in grant funding for our capital program. Next slide, please. Every year, we adopt performance measures for the Creeks Division. These are based on programmatic changes as well as milestones with our capital program. I wanted to highlight a few of these, and these go back to specific capital projects that we just showed in the table. We have a performance measure to complete preliminary design plans for water quality improvement and creek restoration project on Arroyo Burrow at Palermo Drive. That's a property that the Creeks Division acquired almost 2 years ago now, and we will be working with the community on the design and outreach of a project and plan to complete that preliminary design by the end of the next fiscal year. We also expect to complete construction of the Arroyo Burrow Open Space Restoration Project, Phase 2, which is restoration of part of Arroyo Burrow Creek at the Arroyo Burrow Open Space. We're adding a pedestrian bridge over Arroyo Burrow that will connect to the multi-use path that's currently being constructed on Las Positas Road, and will connect over into the open space, and also the restoration of a tributary to Arroyo Burrow coming down from Campanile Hill. We expect that project to start construction probably by the end of May, or at least by early June, and we'll complete our planting phase of the project probably in the beginning of November, so that we will hopefully take advantage of rainfall that will come this fall and winter. Another performance measure that has been updated for next year is to initiate planning and preliminary design for a creek restoration project and water quality improvement project on Mission Creek in Oak Park. So we're looking at doing some additional restoration. The Creeks Division did a restoration project at the upstream end of Oak Park several years ago. It was completed in 2010, and we're looking at additional sections of Mission Creek through Oak Park. And then lastly, we have a performance measure to initiate construction of a water quality improvement project and wetland restoration at the Andre Clark Bird Refuge. And that is a project you all are familiar with. We've presented to the commission before on that project. We're moving through the permitting process right now. We've completed our CEQA work, and because the area is so ecologically sensitive, we've got 7 different permitting agencies to work through, and we are in the process of working through them. Once we obtain those permits, we expect to begin construction. That will be hopefully about a year from now. Next slide, please. So just to recap some key issues for the Creeks Fund for FY22, we're looking at a projected total revenue increase of about $300,000 from our adopted FY21 budget. A significant part of our spending increase or change from the adopted FY21 budget is $120,000 for a technical studies update. We have a creek inventory and assessment study that was done in 2000 and a creek existing condition study that was completed in 2005. So they've been around for a while. The creeks are dynamic features of our city, and so we're going to spend some money in the next fiscal year to update those studies and make sure the information that we have in them is accurate. As I mentioned earlier, we have a proposed increase in our capital improvement program transfer from $900,000 to $1,025,000. And our budget is close, but not quite balanced. So as we have done in past years, we're proposing to transfer about $141,000 from the Creeks Fund reserve to balance our budget for this year. So with that, I will conclude. And if you have questions now, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, I'd be happy to wait till the whole presentation is complete and answer questions then. Thank you.
May I ask one question?
Yes, Commissioner Perry.
We sat through a presentation on the bird refuge a year or two back, where we were shown 3 different proposed solutions to the stench. Which of the 3 are you moving forward with?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair, Commissioners. The current scope of the project, that one of the issues with, you mentioned the stench. So there is an odor problem with the bird refuge. One of the problems there is that the bird refuge is very shallow. We have a lot of nutrient input. The water temperature is high, and there are very few opportunities for the bird refuge to flush itself out, for that water to to exchange with the ocean and with the fresh water coming down from the watershed. Historically, the bird refuge was connected to Sycamore Creek via a coastal lagoon along East Beach that would help breach that sand berm and allow the bird refuge to drain into the ocean, and then it would refill itself. The scope of the project involves 5 main elements now. The first is a dry weather treatment element. It's a natural treatment element. It's over at the municipal tennis court, and it's essentially a wetland area to get dry weather flow and treat that water in a wetland area in between Old Coast Highway and the tennis courts, so that we will reduce the nutrient loads going into the bird refuge and hopefully in turn reduce the algal blooms that then cause those stink events. A second element is moving from the mountainside towards the ocean is some restoration along the edge of the bird refuge that will include planting a lot of native plants. It will involve regrading some of the edges, and it will be there to improve bird habitat and also to remove nutrients from the bird refuge through the plants. The third major element is to replace and really improve the weir and weir gate structure. So the weir is kind of a dam that blocks the water into the bird refuge and prevents it from being able to flush. There was a gate installed on that would allow flushing. It was installed back in the 80s, but it is now non-functional. And so we're looking at essentially replacing that weir structure and including a gate structure that will allow that water to be able to flush out of the bird refuge. And then fourth, there is a dune restoration component on the beach on the east side, or the Clark Estate side of the coastal lagoon area. So there will be some the dunes will be restored in that area, creating some habitat and some sea level rise benefits. And then lastly, we're seeking to permit the ability to what we call prime the sand berm that keeps water from flowing into the ocean from the bird refuge. So that sand berm builds up along the beach, and then we often have experiences where we'll have a heavy rainfall and Cabrillo Boulevard will become flooded because the sand berm is so high that the water surface goes over Cabrillo before it goes over the sand berm. So in advance of storms, we would shave down that sand berm a little bit to allow the water to breach over the lagoon in a storm and be able to flush the bird refuge. So those are all the elements. That's the scope of the project.
So my question was actually specific to that presentation. Are none of those threes in consideration? They went from $1 million to $11 million, and it was a way to reconfigure or to create circulation in the bird refuge to prevent the stagnation, or whatever you'd like to call it. So are those off the table entirely?
No, we selected one of those options.
So the question is then, which one?
Well, I just explained to you what the project was, so I'm not sure what you mean. It's not to go. I don't remember what.
11 million or the one in the middle.
Oh, we anticipate. Excuse me, Madam Chair and Commissioners. We anticipate the construction cost of this project to be in the $2.5 million range.
Okay.
I think the $11 million option was one that would have involved lifting Cabrillo Boulevard up and out of the floodway, and so replacing, creating a bridge and
right. Mm-hmm.
building a new road over the channel there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Does anyone else have a question for now, or would like to save them Okay, looks like, thank you, Mr. Benson. We'll circle back around at the end. Welcome, Ms. LeBlanc.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I will present the golf fund to you. So next slide, please. The golf fund, as Jill mentioned earlier, is an enterprise fund, and the Santa Barbara Golf Club is dedicated to providing residents and visitors an exceptional and affordable golf experience. Next slide, please. So we built this budget, again, as Jill mentioned, a little bit differently than how the rest of the department projected the budget for fiscal years 22 and 23. This is because throughout the pandemic, golf has actually seen a surge of participation, and we expect that participation will start to decline as more and more opportunities open up to do other kinds of recreation, but that it will continue to have higher rounds than it had been having in the previous several years. So some of the other assumptions that we built in are typical weather, although we did have below average rainfall this winter, and that may impact our water needs in the next months, and a continued investment in capital programming, maintenance, and excellent customer service. Next slide, please. So our total revenue for next year is expected to come in at about just under $3.4 million. And this year, for perspective on how COVID, the pandemic has impacted golf, this year is projected to come in at about 3.6 million. And if we had not been in a pandemic, so kind of our status quo expectation would be right around $3 million. So you can really see the impact that we have had on revenues at the golf course this year. And looking at the sources of revenue, the breakdown of sources of revenue is really relatively similar to in previous years, where golf fees and cards, membership cards, really drive the bulk of our revenues, with cart revenues being another large source of revenue. So next slide, please. When you take a look at total rounds played at the golf course, you can really see that surge that we're having in this budget year of FY21 as quite an outlier over time. But you can see that we actually had pretty high rounds played around, a decade ago, roughly. And we're expecting what we've budgeted for FY22 is a decrease from where we are right now, but an increase over where we had been in the prior couple of years before that. So we're expecting 60,000 rounds next year, but we will be monitoring that closely and may make adjustments if we are trending above or below that expectation. Next slide, please. And when you take a look at green fees, this, again, you can see that surge in participation in FY21. And you can see that we've had a kind of slow and steady growth of green fees since 2010. This is what you would want to see because CPI at the same time has gone up 22%. And so, as we mentioned before, with water rates and labor costs going up, we do need to try to keep our fees increasing, year over year, so that we can keep up with those costs. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about the fees at the golf course now. We aim to set the fees to maximize participation, to really target the market here in this area for golf, to stay competitive with other local courses, make sure we're providing community benefits, and as I said before, try to keep up with labor and water cost increases, as well as put enough money in so that we can support the capital needs of the course. Next slide, please. So this is a selection of some of the recommended fee changes in 22 that are the most notable changes. The fees would take effect in September, and the biggest impacts, I guess, are the preferred club card would be increasing $10 to $89 a year. So this is an opportunity for people who are frequent golfers to join this club, and you get $5 off every round of golf, as well as early access to golf booking times, which has been, again, with the rise in use, that's been a really valuable part of the preferred club. We also are making some modest increases to driving range, medium and large buckets of $1 each. Cart fees would be increasing $1. The 18-hole round of golf has a $1 increase as well. And then we're looking at some youth programming fees, fee increases, which range from $10 to $25, depending on what the program is. These are, again, larger increases, but they're actually trying to bring us up to a little bit closer to cost recovery. The programs are currently not cost recovery. And if you look at what the rates are changing to, you can see that there's still very competitive prices for youth programming. And these also have scholarships for children in need available. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, staying competitive in this market is one of the things that we're looking at with fees. So what you can see here are a comparison of our fees with those at Glen Annie and Sandpiper. So those are other accessible local courses to Santa Barbarans. And you can see that our fees are still significantly lower than Glen Annie and Sandpiper. I will mention that Glen Annie also offers a club, the 805 Club. So by participating in that, you are getting actually close to $20 off of your typical rates that you're looking at here. So comparing the standard adult weekday rate in Santa Barbara, then you're paying $45 for ours versus $44 for Glen Annie. However, if you join the preferred club with us, you would be paying $40. So we're still staying in line, and even when you look at the cost of the benefits that you get from the club memberships. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about the operating expenses. And I apologize, this says FY20, but it is FY22. So the operating budget is proposed at $3.3 million. And nearly half of that goes towards the actual maintenance of keeping the course in good shape. Water costs, as we mentioned, and labor are significant costs as well. And you can see another good chunk is just the golf operational oversight. Next slide, please. So I'm pleased to speak to a good large increase in operating fund balance. So our fund balance reserves for the golf fund. This will be the first year in many years that the golf course will actually meet the council policy target for the reserves. And we expect that will continue to grow over the next 2 budget cycles as well. So as we're looking at the end of fiscal year 23, we're anticipating reserves of about $1.8 million. And this will really help to support future years that might not be so bright. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, that was the slide I was just speaking to. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, so the capital budget program, there are 4 standard capital budget programs for the golf course. The Players Improvement Fund, which is a $1 surcharge on every round of golf played. That money goes into, is tracked, and the Golf Course Advisory Committee, the Players Improvement Fund subcommittee of that committee, provides direction on how they'd like to see those funds used. This year, just a couple of weeks ago, they identified that they would like to prioritize renovating additional bunkers. They've already been working on that over the last couple of years, and they'd like to do even more. So we will be putting the remainder of this current fiscal year 21's budget, as well as fiscal year 22's budget, into renovating additional bunkers. We also have about $80,000 available for golf course improvement projects. And over the next 2 years, we're looking at replacing netting at the 18th hole, doing some restroom repairs at the restroom closest to the 18th hole, and partial funding of tee boxes. Every year we spend money on power turf equipment, and about $80,000. You can see a list of a variety of large equipment purchases that we'll be making at the golf course. And we have infrastructure renewal and improvement projects. And this is about $75,000 in 22 and $93,000 in 23, including some minor golf shop renewals, replacement of rental clubs, and additional funding of bunkers. So the bunker project would be shared between this funding source and the Players Improvement Fund. Next slide, please. Our performance measures have not changed much year over year, where we'll be continuing to monitor and aim to grow green fees and cart fee revenues, manage our potable water consumption, and maintain high customer service, and then grow our preferred card holder membership program. Next slide, please. And that is the conclusion of the golf course presentation.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc.
So Chair Clark and Commissioners, we always ask the Commission to make recommendations to Council regarding our fund budget. So can we have the next slide, please? So the staff is recommending that the Commission recommend to Council approval of the fiscal year 22 and 23 Golf Fund, Creeks Fund, and General Fund operating and capital budgets, including the proposed fees and charges schedule. Obviously, we are open to answer any questions or respond to discussion of the Commission before you take action.
Do we have, I guess we should, after we ask questions, we should ask if there's anybody, let's not forget to see if there's anyone from the public wishing to speak on this. For now, do we have any specific questions? I had just a question, Ms. Zachary. So for the 9 positions being held vacant, who's doing the job of the recreation manager right now?
Chair Clark and Commissioners, that position's been vacant for a number of years. First as a result of the Cabrillo Pavilion closure for construction, and then subsequently for in response to COVID. We're spreading the workload around. So Rich Hanna, who's the recreation manager, is shouldering more of the burden. And the recreation supervisors are stepping up as well. We've been, contemplating and anticipating being able to refill that position, because there's a number of other initiatives not being undertaken by the department, but won't do that until our revenues return in a way that makes sense. The priority has always been on filling other staff positions, whether they're supervisory or general staff positions, above that position.
Okay. So yes, Commissioner Longstreet.
I have a question. Have there been any impacts to vegetation management? I know that's always a big issue.
Chair Clark and Commissioner Longstreet, we do our vegetation management work with both staff and contract work. So there have been no reductions. Over the years when we've had parks such as Parma Park, we have had the Parma Park Trust provide more support in that way in order to spread the resources wider. And then also, more recently, we had the opportunity to, I think it was a CAL FIRE crew, and Ms. LeBlanc could probably jump in. We're finding ways to work with the fire department to bring other resources to help us with more vegetation management. There's always more to do than we can do, just like everything else when it comes to managing our park system. But we have not made reductions in that area.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my question for now. Lots of comments, but questions.
I have lots of comments too, but not questions really. All right, is there, Ms. Navarez, could you let me know if there is anybody from the public who wanted to speak on this agenda item?
Chair Clark, no, we have no attendees at this point.
Okay. So if there's no questions, I think it's appropriate to take action and discuss their comments. I hear someone talking. Did someone? Oh, it's a cat, maybe. So can we take action and then discuss that? Can we?
I think we can make our comments, which then staff will fold in and we'll have a motion at the end of it, I'm sure.
Right. Who would like to start their comments?
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
Another time, again, you know, it seems like about every 10 years we have a major crisis, but I think that we're looking at a longer impacts to the general fund budget from the pandemic. And that what for me to convey to council is it's time to decide who we are as a city as far as what services we're providing to residents. So one of the most important services we provide is the open space. It's what makes our city livable. So my concerns are the rising water and employee costs, and those are the two things that keep those spaces livable and safe for the community. And that the council realize that going forward. No one can materialize money out of nowhere, but as we set priorities as a city, that's the opportunities that we have. A lot's going to be happening in the downtown core and in and out into the east and the west side that really we have to maintain those open spaces and our public buildings. So I have a great concern that we're going to be falling farther and farther behind. I'm glad we have a lot of projects, not quite shovel ready, but ready for if stimulus money comes down the pike. I'm really concerned with the upsurge we see in youth violence recently, the concerns that we all have about how to take care of our youth and families. And in Parks and Rec, we're keeping a recreation manager position open because we can't budget for it. It's not because no one wants it. And that may be the person that makes sure things happen. And I just want to be positioned as we come out of the pandemic to do things like reopen the drop-in teen program at Franklin Center. I want the younger kids occupied in the summer. I want to see after-school sports. We all know what can't happen during the pandemic, but in a year, will they be forgotten? And I don't want our youth programming to be forgotten. So those are my biggest concern. And that next year that we're facing something similar, And, you know, it's great. I fully support the summer nights program, but I also fully support keeping kids busy after school that are in elementary school, that who we want to keep under our wing and active and in the community. So, you know, just to always remember how much happens at like the Franklin Center and the West Side Center and food distribution and all those things that benefit so many members of our community that need the help. You know, I don't have any qualms with any of the decisions made. I think there's some that I wish didn't have to be made, but they have to be made. It's just, I'm looking now at the future and listening to that finance committee presentation and the realization that, you know, we don't have a shopping center. We don't get that kind of sales tax. Downtown's virtually non-existent. We don't have Costco. That's revenue, and we don't have other revenue sources. We have tourists. But our city faces a crisis. We're getting stimulus money, but you look at the stimulus money, we have no reserves. We're a community that's looked at mudslides and a lot of things that have tackled our reserves every time. So in the big picture, I'm just very concerned, and I want to make sure we prioritize our open spaces and keeping them safe, and what it costs to do that, and what it costs to take care of our young people and families. So those would be the comments I would want. I read through comments that I made in 2019 about the budget, and boy, it wasn't that much different. So here we go again.
Commissioner Mary, do you have back? No. I guess, you know, my comments, I agree with Phoebe. I don't take issue with any of the cuts you've made, and I also wish that you hadn't had to make them. And what I would similarly convey to council is that right now we are vulnerable. With their summer nights program, they're looking at the vulnerability of our youth to violence. Our youth are vulnerable, our seniors are vulnerable, and our adults, where we are all in this really weird place that we've never been before with the pandemic. We're not even beginning to understand the effects that it's going to have on the emotional health of our youth and our teens, and what will come of that. They're disconnected, they're isolated. I've heard so many of my friends tell me that their kids are riddled with anxiety and depression. And anybody who's had kids or read any parenting books knows that getting them active and engaged and outside and involved is the best way to head off that depression and anxiety. And that's what our Parks Department does. It gives us summer nights all night long when it's funded. And I hope that funding for the department remains a priority for council, because it's the health of our community that's at risk. That's all I have.
Just one comment. I agree. One thing is just maybe if we can get higher priority on those rec management positions, just because if we are trying to do a lot more outdoor activities, and as the summer comes in, I just the demand on the current staff is just really tough. And I know, you know, just from that perspective of understanding and knowing, taking on extra roles can also decrease the morale of the office and just like staff in general, and just being drained and tired. And I think if we're having all these great ideas to have, you know, trapeze and all these outdoor activities and beach activities and things like that, since we are in COVID and can't necessarily utilize indoor activities, having emphasis on that recreation structure as far as like management and even support staff. Like that feels kind of concerning to me, especially as we enter the summer, and it's just a big workload on a small group of people. And I know that there's no budget for it, but maybe there can be more emphasis to hire someone less than 6 months or something, or try to figure out a way to get more support staff would be something that my comment on that.
Thank you. Vice Chair McGill.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say anything fundamentally different. The open spaces are critically important. What we're seeing, I'm afraid we're going to get caught into this do loop with recreation programs where revenue's down because of COVID, so we can't expand the program, so we don't staff, because we don't staff, we can't expand the programs, and we kind of just go into a death spiral where we start losing program, where in fact the summer nights conversation suggests that the reality is we need to be expanding program. Now, obviously there's not the money to do that, but the conversation has already started about expanding program. It's just a different program. So my message to council would be to maybe just even point that out and say, this doesn't start at junior high. It's not just junior high kids. It starts with elementary school. It's the after school programs. It's the sports programs. I think that is something where, I mean, BB, you said it, what are the values of this city going to be, and who are we here to serve and protect, if not our youth, and particularly our underserved youth? And I would love to have that conversation with the council on how to bring that about and not have this become kind of a permanent deficit in programming, which is just where I fear we're going, is a permanent deficit in programming when we actually really desperately need to be increasing programming. Nothing that we don't all feel, I don't think, but I don't, and maybe by way of feedback, I also have a question. And I've voiced this in previous years. I've always had some element of frustration that we don't seem to get our message across soon enough to make a difference. And you've heard me say many times, by the time the PowerPoint slides are printed, it's way too. How do we effectively convey a message and not just deliver a message, but actually engage in a conversation?
Chair Clark, Commissioner McGill, I think that's a question.
Yeah, that was me closing a comment with a question. Sorry.
So we'd strive to inform the commission of when we have things going to council, and it's an easy way to actually make comments. As you know, we have people that participate in public comment on a regular basis to advance concerns and considerations that they have. If the commission would like to request that council have a work session or for a further discussion on programs for youth and doing more for at-risk youth and underserved youth, that's certainly something that you can recommend and propose as part of your comments to the council on the budget. I do appreciate the concern over the number of positions that are vacant, and particularly that 5 of them are in the recreation division. That is the division we will restaff first. And that is where we've already, we're always strategically planning for when things turn the corner, or if we decide that a priority has to change because the immediate need all of a sudden presents itself. So I can assure you that we take that very seriously, that we are so down in staffing, and that we need to have it when we come up with more resources, those will be the first positions to restore to the department.
Can I just add to that? The other part for us as a commission that's really tough in working through a budget is there's so many rules. You know, we all know this, but there's so many rules about employees. You know what, you can't just change a position. You know, we can't magically say, I mean, that someone now doesn't have a job or they get moved to another division. So it's always this balancing act that staff has of what's open at the time. And that has, I think, through the years means that sometimes logic doesn't always play a part because there's rules of union rules, employment rules. And that's been something I've seen over the years. And what you said about the death spiral, I think we've been in that spiral for the last 15 years of budgeting, to be honest with you. You know, just because of finance, not because of a lack of will, but because of a lack of money. You know, what we used to do compared to what we do now, and who we served compared to who we serve now, and the efforts that's made to keep our underserved kids in the system has been big work for staff, I think. So it's why I think it is really something we have to deal with as a whole community value.
Agreed.
So for the commission, we will have your comments and we'll put them together and share them with the council as we always do. Our budget presentation is on May 10th, which is a Monday. And it's, I think, let me double check, at 1 o'clock or 1:30. But we'll certainly provide a reminder to you. Yes, 1:30.
So, Jill?
Yes.
I'm guessing the answer to this question is going to be yes, but having tried both, and I'm not convinced, is it written better or oral comments better in terms of being heard?
Chair Clark and Commissioner McGill, attending a meeting is always really valuable, but understand that people sometimes have conflicts with that. We provide written comments on your behalf to the council, but certainly anything else that you would share as a commissioner or as an individual commissioner, those are all helpful to provide the council with your perspective and your considerations and your recommendations.
Okay. Well, I will certainly make myself available. I mean, pending disaster, I certainly can make myself available on May 10th. And maybe the answer is both, written oral with written follow-up. Though.
Or prelude.
What was that?
Or written prelude.
Yeah, yes. That might be the way to go.
I mean, I always appreciate getting letters prior to commission meetings from interested parties. It helps me receive the commission presentations from a wider perspective. I really do appreciate when we get letters. Okay. Well,
are we ready for a motion?
We are ready for a motion. Are you ready to make one?
Well, I recommend the approval of the proposed FY 22 and 23 Golf Fund, Creeks Fund, and General Fund operating and capital budgets, including the proposed fees and charges schedules. Yeah, I can read it.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right.
So So just on behalf of staff, I just want to thank the commission for, again, I think I did it recently, I'll do it again, for hanging in with us during COVID, participating in this webinar format, and supporting the department in everything that we do. And hopefully we'll see you soon in person. And I would offer that we would hopefully also be able to go out and spend some time in our parks and look at the things that we're trying to achieve.
Yes,
Absolutely.
there's lots of vaccination appointments. If you go to my turn,
Yeah, too many. We need to get those filled.
if you sign up this coming Wednesday between 7:30 and 12:30, it'll be me sticking you.
Well,
Done.
we're done. We're both done.
All right, that's good. All right, with that, we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much, Joe. Thanks. Bye.